Good morning, everyone. So today is April 15th, Thursday, April 15th, approximately 7:30 a.m. And we are going to call the Concord Middle School Building Committee meeting to order. I will take roll call. Is Stephen Crane with us?
Present.
Jared Stanton?
Present.
Matt Johnson?
Present.
Lori Hunter?
Present.
Justin Cameron?
Good morning.
Good morning. John Harris?
Present.
Russ Hughes?
Present.
Kate Hanley?
Present.
Peter Fashalis?
Present.
Good morning, Peter, from
Good
far
morning.
away early. He's in Colorado, so thank you for for joining us so early from out there. Court Booth.
Present.
Heather Bout.
Hi, here.
Hi, good morning. Frank Cannon.
Hello.
Hello, Chris Popoff.
Present.
Charlie Parker.
Present.
Matt Root.
Present.
Pat Nelson.
Present.
And I'm Dawn Goriello, and obviously I'm present. So good morning, everyone. We have a lot to cover, and our first order of business has to do with approval of meeting minutes. And as Court pointed out, for anyone who was on a couple minutes ago, we have approval of the March 18th listed as well as the April 8th. And that was just last week. And those meeting minutes have not been distributed. So if you went looking in your inbox like I did, we don't have those yet. So the March 18th, we deferred from last week, because we had just received them. I'm not sure if folks have had a chance to review them or with everything else that's going on. If I'm happy to defer till our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from today, and just get through today and then approve those two, the March 18th and April 8th. In 2 weeks. I'm comfortable with that because I'll be honest, I've not had a chance to look at the 18th myself. So how's everyone feeling? Do we want to make a motion we need a motion on that, right? To hold those until the next meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All right. Steve, any discussion? Hearing none, and no one's jumping up wanting to approve them. So it's Stephen Crane.
Yes.
Jared Zanton.
Yes.
Matt Johnson.
Yes.
Lori.
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
John Harris.
Yes.
Russ.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Peter Fashalis.
Yes.
Court.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Matt Root.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So looks like we'll have some time in the next couple of weeks to look at those and then make any edits and approve, hopefully approve in 2 weeks. All right, great. So with that, we're going to move on to correspondence. And at this point, I'd like to turn that over to Heather. If you're ready to speak to that, Heather.
Sorry about that. Yes, now I'm unmuted. Sorry, I thought we were going to do comments first. Yes, I am ready for that. So correspondence, we've had a bunch again since it's only been a week, but since last week, actually we've had I'm just catching up on the ones that have come in this morning, so I have to adjust my numbers here. But we have a total from last week now with the new ones of 16. And most of those were about the auditorium. There was another one about the, about the delivery method, and then 3 more that included support of both the larger auditorium and the larger gym. I also just wanted to mention quickly that in last week's report, I know it was large numbers, I think it was 87 or 88 or something, and it was pointed out to me that I neglected to mention that one of those was a letter with many signatures. And so I just wanted to point that out now, because at that point it had, I looked back, at that point it had 109, I think, signatures, but it's actually a live site still. And so I checked the current version of it. And as of this morning, it has 174 signatures. That was a letter asking for a larger auditorium. So just because we've talked numbers and I said 87, I think that wasn't quite accurate, because there was also a letter with 100 that's now 174 signatures asking for a larger auditorium. So just wanted to update on that.
Great,
think that's
thank
it.
you. Okay, excellent. I feel like did we have a meeting this week as far as a listening session? Or am I blurring last week in this? No.
Let's see, not this week. We have two.
I know we
tomorrow.
have PTG tomorrow. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. We've got PTG.
In fact, that's great to mention. Thank you. Two more tomorrow, with the one with all of the elementary school and preschool together, the PTGs, and then one with the CMS PTG. So we're really looking forward to hearing from all of those constituencies tomorrow.
Yes, I saw it in the Alcott Owl this morning, so
good.
I know that got distributed to our elementary school. All right, great. Yes, Court.
Very quickly for the record, Heather, I'm not sure you mentioned it. We received one about the survey as well, with that additional analysis that a community member.
Thank you. Thank you, Court. And then that was for, you know what? It wasn't in my same inbox of where they all come. Thank you very much. We did receive one with extra analysis that was sent to Dawn, and Dawn forwarded it to everyone. So thank you. It went outside my normal
Right. Thank
catching
you.
of how I capture those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? And I was going to comment on that later. I also received a similar request to that. So that was basically looking at the data of the survey and trying to break out different constituencies, you know, residents only versus just parents, which was what I had said when we were talking about it that we were hoping to do. So that was really helpful. And let me just publicly thank Dean Banfield for doing that. So that's great data. I also wanted to mention I had a similar request from someone else to look at the data and try to pull out, separate the parents of younger kids who will attend the middle school versus the parents who won't. So there was a point made that, you know, that maybe parents of kids age, you know, 5th grade and up, whose kids aren't going to attend the middle school, should be grouped more with the residents only whose kids won't, who won't have kids at the middle school. So that's just to know that data is not sorted yet, because that just came in more recently, but that's something that may also be looked at or be able to be pulled apart.
And following up on that, I do appreciate sometimes when some of the communication we get through email from citizens, them saying, I'm a parent of someone in the school system, but my children will be out of the middle school, you know, by the time. So, you know, just recognize they're at that point, like a general citizen versus a parent who's got children that may attend here. So that's always nice to, you know, just when people share that sort of information, it's in my mind, it's just helpful.
I think it was a relevant point, because I think to clump together all parents is not necessarily accurate when, for instance, I'm a parent with kids in the schools, but none of them are ever going to go to the middle school. And so to some extent that could be considered more similar to a resident without kids in the schools. So anyway, again, and this is all to say there are so many ways to parse data, right? There's no exact science or answer to this, but just wanted to point all that out. And again, big thanks to Dean Banfield for doing that sorting, because that was really helpful.
Great. So unless anyone else has information on correspondence we've received, thank you, Heather, for the update. And I know I read all the emails, so there's been a lot. I woke up to a bunch this morning, so. All right, great. Next, we've got public comments. So I would like to recognize those with hands up in the feature, and it looks like Mr. Salimi has his up. So, hi.
Louis Salemi, 68 Great Meadows Road, and I was the former vice chair of the CCH project, and I'll try to be brief. So there have been a number of misrepresentations made about CM at risk versus DBB, which I would like to clear up quickly. The first one is CM at risk results in a 5 to 9% increase in the total project cost. That's just flat out false. And if that was the case, then why would the MSBA actually allow school districts to pursue CM at risk? On the high school project, we saved $20 million going CM at risk in total. And I would point out that the Concord Library, which has Elise Woodward, Jeff Adams, John Boyden, and myself overseeing the project, we would never pursue in this project at CM at risk something that results in a 5 to 9% cost increase. If you go to the MSBA website, the majority of large projects defined as 80 million or greater are CM at risk, and very few actually have gone DBB. Again, going to the website, a lot of small projects go DBB. Today's bid environment is going to change dramatically when this project goes out to bid. Well, I can appreciate some jobs today are coming in under, that's because of COVID. You are heading to an incredibly tight market in 2025, and not going CM at risk is going to put the project at significant cost risk. The middle school design is incredibly complex and will be very difficult to build, and this lends itself to CM at risk. I actually surveyed some of the largest CM firms in Boston who I've gotten to know because of the high school project. No one is going to go near this project if it goes DBB. And the reason is there's no cost control, and these firms are going to suffer huge reputational damage if there's a big cost bust. You're going to attract second and third tier firms, and quality is going to suffer. And finally, there's a statement that suggests that change orders are somehow higher under CM at risk is just patently false. Actually, the reverse is true. And the reason why you hire a CM firm is for their pre-construction services, which eliminates the potential for change orders. It allows for much greater pricing. On the CCHS project, our change orders were close to zero. Thank you.
Dawn, if I could just have a second.
Absolutely.
I just want to remind our citizens who have taken the time to be here and who want to share their opinions and their thoughts about the project, that we are a committee that's charged with making a decision. And I'm going to borrow from what town moderators often say at town meetings, that we want to be collaborative and civil in our discussions, and that we want people to be able to share their opinions, but not to be perhaps making some assumptions about the validity, things like false. And I do appreciate that there are people who feel very passionately about this decision, and we have a responsibility to listen very closely to all of the facts. But if we could kind of keep things at a factual level, I would just like to remind our committee and our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That's a great reminder, and I appreciate it. Charlotte.
Actually, my daughter borrowed my computer and I didn't notice until I logged in. So actually, this is Elizabeth Wintercorn. I'm at 800 Main Street. And I apologize. This is Zoom hijacking by the fifth grader. Thank you all again for taking public comment this morning. And I know you've heard from me before. Sorry, I'm a loud kind of person. I do hear the concerns, I think, financially about the project and what we are deciding to do with the project. I understand that. I'm one of the people that will never see the inside of this middle school until I choose to either see my grandchildren there or just happen to go to somebody's theater project, right? It is imperative that if we are building a building, as Pat said last week, that is going to last us another 50 years, that we are not behind the times, we are not short-sighted, we are not forgetting the large population that does drama, music, art, theater. I mean, I have 3 children that do not play varsity sports and that are all in Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra at the highest level in, heading into high school, right? So we have to support that group of children, and the auditorium proposed size is ludicrous. I'm sorry, it's ludicrous. And if there is going to be an adequate space for the sport that you are discussing, you have to give adequate space. You cannot short shrift these middle school music teachers who are making a huge difference. Without this middle school music program, without supporting it for space for the teachers correctly with the auditorium, you are never going to get a high school program with kids in all the higher level groups that you want, unless they're doing it elsewhere. And what's the point of living in Concord in these amazing school districts with these amazing teachers and these amazing opportunities if you take it away? So the auditorium that you propose currently, the 250 seat auditorium, is not adequate. I know it's your choice. I know you have to make this decision. I am voicing very clearly a 250 seat auditorium is not adequate for now. It is not adequate for 5 years from now. It sure as heck ain't adequate for 50 years from now. You have to give over 500 seats, 550, right, for an auditorium that's going to house the entire middle school space. It has to be bigger than what you currently provide. Sorry, bye, have a nice day.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Or Charlotte. Say hi to Charlotte for us. Anyone else? I don't see any other hands. Is anyone, I'm on speaker mode, so I don't have the gallery. Is there anyone? Scott Bates, I see your visual hand. Hello.
Hi, I'm Scott Bates. I'm a former building committee member with the Willard Building Committee. I was also served on the planning board in Concord. I'm a resident of 52 Indian Spring Road, and I've been following this, and you've obviously been receiving a lot of my correspondence. I'm in the construction business. I've been in it for 25 years. I understand owner rep and CM, and I know the facts of a lot of these types of contracts. And I just want to I just wanted to have the opportunity to let you know that I was really upset and saddened by the misrepresentation by the authors of the responses to the questions that you received yesterday. The statements and facts were obviously show a clear bias towards DBB. Hopefully you, the committee, can see through this and have some research on the side. This disappointment is what kind of professional advice are you paying for and getting? I recommend that you all review these responses with an outside impartial construction expert to get the true facts. The responses about change orders is completely wrong. The response about the contingency is wrong. The design build firm does not give back contingency. It's a lump sum bid. The idea that you can't bring on a CM at the start of DD at the rate at the end of SD is wrong. The idea that you're going to spend $350 for pre-con is inaccurate. I just got off the phone with a CM who would go after this if they would put 150 to 190 for a $100 million job for pre-con. And then the numbers that you have at the very end are obviously grossly biased towards DBB, and you inflated some of the numbers to help your cause. I'm just sad, and you're getting bad information. I'm not trying to stir things up and make it worse for you. I understand we want to make this civil, but I just want you to make sure you as a committee are getting the right facts from professionals so you can make a good decision, because you're not going to get good firms, strong quality firms going after this building if it's DBB. You're gonna lose out on all those great firms. And with a building of 80 million or plus, there's limited firms of quality that are gonna go after this. So I'm just giving you my ideas. I've been passionate about this, and hopefully I've not been too disruptive, but I wanted to make sure you guys are getting the facts straight. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Scott. I just want to say that we support our professionals, and we appreciate that they provide us with accurate current information. And while, we don't know in 2 years who will go after this project, I just want to say that speculating that you won't get someone that's quality or you will is an opinion. I am a professional and do this for a living, and have seen in very recent bids CMs going after DBB projects. So there's been a lot of I'm not gonna go back and forth, but I just want to say that some of the statements can be foreseen as opinion, and we don't know. No one has a crystal ball, so we don't know who would actually pursue this in a couple years when it goes out to bid. And just recognizing that an $80 million project is sort of it's not large at this point. There are $350, $300 million projects. And what I'm seeing in the industry is 80 to 100 construction cost is about the going rate. So I just want to share that over time, things change. And with the cost going up, there are still, we had 9 bids on a recent $80 million construction cost project that I worked on, and some of them are CM. So I just want to be clear that, people are entitled to their opinions. That's what this is about. But I don't want things stated that as a fact when they're opinions. So anyway, that's all I'm gonna say on that.
Todd Benjamin
Okay.
has his hand up.
Who does?
Todd
Todd?
Benjamin.
Yep. Hi, Todd.
Todd, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I thought I hit the unmute button. So thanks for the time today, Todd Benjamin, Sudbury Road. I appreciate everybody's work and effort on the committee. I've worked on committees in town and had elected roles. I know how much work and dedication it takes. My comments are pertaining more to the auditorium and the gym. From my perspective, I'm kind of agnostic as to whether it happens, but what I'm not agnostic about is the budgetary impacts. If it's decided to make the auditorium larger or to add larger and more gyms, then do so within the budget that the voters agreed to. If it can't be done within the budget, then as other communities do, then perhaps a separate citizen-led fundraising entity should be undertaken so that they can raise the funds for larger gyms or larger auditoriums. Or perhaps what we need to do is look at how we can have cost savings in the school budget to fund these things. The one thing that we should not be doing is continuously burdening the taxpayers. And let us not forget that the middle school project is one of 3 or 4 capital project plans that the town has. The town is also, as we know, doing extensive townhouse renovations. There's still the concept being discussed that the town may want to do this town campus kind of approach someplace. There's still the need for massive renovations at the DPW, which will cost, as I understand it, somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million. And finally, there's still the talk of having a public safety complex for the town. Now, Ashland, a town near us who has done a recent public safety complex with a population approximate to ours of about 16,500 people, their public safety complex was $37.5 million. So when you add up all of these projects, you start to approach $200 million. Who is going to fund all this? The middle school project is not in a vacuum, because the one group of people who are going to fund all these projects are the taxpayers. We cannot continuously burden taxpayers with exorbitant property tax rises. We can't do it. It's not feasible. We all talk about we want diversity. We want more people from different backgrounds to join our community. We want people to stay in our town and age in place. We want young families to come to town. There is no way that is going to happen if we continuously overburden taxpayers. So that is my perspective there. Again, I really don't mind, the point is not having a larger auditorium, have more gyms. At the end of the day, it's how you're going to pay for it, stay within the budget. And the last thing about the budget that I'm sure we're all aware about is the exorbitant cost increase we've seen in commodities and in labor. Now, yes, this project will take place in 2 years or whatever, but how are we also factoring in what may be a new environment for the costs of labor and supplies that go into building this project? The other point I'd like to make as it pertains to the auditorium is some of the information that I've seen is people have mentioned, well, it would be great to have a community center component here at the school. While I think we're all in favor of having efficiencies and having our buildings serve multiple purposes, we can't lose fact that the goal of this building is education. And if we really want a community center, well, guess what? We have over 20 acres of a developable land at 2229 Main Street. That could be a great site for a community center. But let's not overburden the taxpayers with something that just may not be a good fit for the project that voters agreed to. The last thing I would say is I would urge that your meetings be done at a time that is more convenient for people. I know, again, how difficult it is to get people together, but I do find it very odd that your meetings at 7:30 in the morning essentially exclude the population of people who will be participating in the enjoyment of this building, i.e. parents with young children who are in the school system. I really think that it's a disservice to be excluding them from your meetings because of the time that it's on. I would love to stay for the full meeting, but guess what? I have to go to work. I have to get kids out the door to go to school. And I'm sure there are thousands of other people in town in a similar circumstance. And this is the reason that this is the only meeting that I've attended. So perhaps it might be possible to have a staggered schedule where some of your meetings are in the morning and some are in the evening. But I do think it's a very unfortunate circumstance that due to the scheduling of your meetings, that you're excluding the very people who will be who are most involved or most interested, or the largest shareholders in the conversation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Do you see anything, Pat? I don't see any virtual hands.
Don, can I just jump in with a quick, oh, I see a hand, but I just had a quick correction to my my correspondence, because I recalculated with the new ones that had come in over the past 4 hours, and it was 18 total, not 16. I just wanted to correct myself.
Okay, Heather, thank you.
Of those, most were about the auditorium, again, 14 of them.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Is that Melissa? Yes? Okay. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, good morning. Hi, my name is Melissa Liazis, 325 the Valley Road. I have a 6th grader and an 8th grader, so students in the Concord Middle School, but who will not be there for the new school, obviously. So I'm speaking as a taxpayer, I guess, in this situation. I have sent in a letter, so I won't repeat everything that I've said, but I wanted to reiterate my support both for a larger auditorium and for a new middle school or a larger gymnasium at the new middle school. As someone who's been to many band performances, orchestra performances, parent meetings, the musical, other things in the current auditorium space, which is larger than what's proposed for the new building, those are always filled to the capacity, parents and people standing in the back and spilling out into the hallway. So I can't really imagine having a space that would be smaller than that in the new building. I think it doesn't fit the needs of the community. Trying to hold those performances in the gym would just not offer the same kind of quality experience and support for our middle school students. Trying to move to the high school is not really very practically feasible to do that. There's all kinds of logistical issues involved with that. In terms of the cost, I certainly understand there's added cost for a larger auditorium and gym. As a taxpayer, that's something I support and I am willing to pay for. I understand there's trade-offs and choices we have to make, but I also think that if we're investing in a building that is going to be there for hopefully 50 years, that we need to make what is the best long-term decision to support those programs. That, as you all know, that budget was set some time ago, certainly. It's been a number of years, things change, circumstances change, and I think it's responsible and in the best interests of our children to build the building that it's going to meet their needs for the long term. So I hope the committee will support the larger spaces, and as a taxpayer, I support the larger budget. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Anyone else before we move away from public comment? Doesn't look like it. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts with us today. All right, so we are going to move on to presentation and discussion. I think, Kristen, you have a short slide kind of reminder deck to set the stage for our discussion today. But just so everyone's aware, I think you can see that item 6 is calling for votes both on our overall budget and scope, which includes obviously the larger topics that we've been discussing lately, including the gymnasium and auditorium, as well as project delivery method, which includes design bid build and construction manager at risk, also known as 149, 149A for those following along. So Kristen was going to walk us through just kind of a brief, reminder of where we are, so we can set the stage for discussion on this. And when we get to a point, Pat and I would, welcome any sort of motions that anyone may have, and some of the discussion can obviously happen within the framework of those. So just something to think about as we move through this presentation, and a reminder that, it was our committee's charge to, make a recommendation on a school, but also to listen to the community. So just reminding everyone I know we just went through some of this last week, but it's been a long week maybe for some. So just setting the stage for what our goal today is, which is to move forward on the scope and budget as well as construction delivery method. So Kristen, floor is yours. And I'd like to hold any sort of questions and comments to the discussion piece. So if we can move through this presentation and then have discussion, I would appreciate that.
And this is going to be very swift because it is just a recap and a refresher on some of the work that's been done over the last few months. Our goals recap that we're very familiar with at this point. Last meeting, the review of what was behind Article 14 in supporting information. Also related to the questions about sustainability, that Net Zero Ready is part of the project. This building committee charge as having the authority on the design decisions and the recommendation. The schedule scenarios that we've been looking at and will continue to review as we move forward, especially after the DBB and CMAR discussion. Also where we are relative to other projects on the MSBA chart in terms of cost per square foot. The fact that our base program and ed plan includes the team teaching approach and model, and then also the visual representation of all of the space summary in the program, and the nuances of the permutations that occurred between last year and this year, including the addition of an auditorium, which wasn't included before. We did the updates to the preferred concept from last year in floor plan form, and had at the time also tested the 2 MIAA cross-court gym, and that's been reviewed. We've developed a site plan to represent the fields program, parking, and so on, and to also study and understand the impervious lot coverage area, because that's a driver and very important to the project, and have shown also the outline of the existing school footprint to talk about how the school might operate while during construction. In terms of the after the base ed plan scope was voted, we of course began to study above budget scope, above what the RFS outlined as the budget between $80 and $100 million project cost. We recapped what the existing gymnasia have for courts. Talked about the recommended in the base program that fits within our $100 million project budget, which is the 7,000 net square foot gym with smaller than regulation size cross courts. We heard a lot in the last meeting about what was presented in March of 2020, and those have been really superseded by the new information that we have. The base program had the 6,000 net square foot gym. The 8,600 was really just still smaller than regulation size cross courts and doesn't represent what the new information we received from CCYB about the practice court sizes that would be preferred. And then the 2 MIA, which is still something that we're looking at. Here again, related to the gym, then we received the updated information from CCYB about the intent of using 2 practice courts at 74 by 46. And that's what the middle size is driven by in terms of the options that we looked at and presented. The auditorium, again, a recap of what's existing. The total parking count between the 2 schools we understand is 142 approximately spaces. And so, the parking has been a discussion about the gym and auditorium. Also, the auditorium considerations from last year, we looked at a black box. We looked at the 1 grade and the 2 grade auditoria with the additional capacity for staffing. Again, in our revisiting of the scope, we proceeded with the 270 seats as the base space summary, understanding that the auditorium is very important part of the educational plan, and then continued to represent the 550 as a 2 grade scenario. And then in recent meetings, we've heard the community mention the 350 seats that the existing auditorium is, to understand maybe if we can't go all the way to 550, but 270 is too small, at least maintain status quo. So that's been something that's been studied, and numbers have been provided. We did preliminary estimates on the impervious area and the costs based on net square foot and gross square foot increases for these different scope items, and made that available. These lines are for the educational plan is within the $100 million budget, and these would be increases recommended to accommodate these additional program elements in isolation. We also have heard that combinations are of interest. And so we did the four-way combinations of smaller with small and largest with large and so on. So we have combinations A through B here. In recent meetings, we've also heard about budget concerns, that the community, there's a large group that has budget concerns and a large group that's interested in increasing the size to respond to community feedback. And so I'm highlighting one example where this would, combination A, for example, would fulfill the CCYB practice court request, which I understand is representing kind of the community basketball interests, and then also maintaining status quo. That's the combination A scenario. So we just wanted to, and also just noting that that does fall within the 15, that does not exceed the 15% lot coverage limit, and it is responsive and within the Article 14 assumptions that had been made quite some years ago. So that's just highlighting one as an example. And so now I'll hand it off to Lorraine Finnegan from our office, who's going to help walk us through a couple recaps on CM.
You can go back for just 1 second, Kristen, just leave it on the project. So I just want to remind the committee, when we start a project, we don't start saying this is going to be a DBB or a CM. We start a project with outlining what is the need. We go through educational planning. We don't talk about the delivery method until we start to concept options. Once options are started to be developed, then we talk about what is the best method in which to deliver the project. So I just want to make it clear that we do not come with a bias for DBB or CM. I've been doing schools for 23 years at SMMA, and I will tell you, I have both. And before, obviously before 2004, they were all DBB, but since then it's been a mix. And if you go onto the MSBA website today, of the 12 projects that are bidding in 2021, 7 are CM and 5 are DBB. So it really is a project dependent. It is not favored one way or the other. And it really is a responsible discussion to have, because of my 23 years, I can tell you we have documented the costs of both, the pros of both, and the cons of both. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Kristen. So yes, CM at risk does add value. I have multiple CM at risk projects under construction right now, but they have a specific reason. They're very, their phasing is complicated. The sites are complicated. Some of them are occupied renovations. We've needed early bid packages, which the CM at risk project does benefit you in that sense. We've done early bid packages with DBB in the past. It gets a little complicated because of the overlap between contractors. Then there can sometimes be, was the existing condition left by contractor 1 really the existing condition assumed by contractor 2? So it's not ideal, and that's where the CM at risk does benefit for early packages. And yes, they do provide constructability reviews during design. With that said, SMMA is an ISO certified company, and we have an independent in-house QC process on all of our projects, regardless of the delivery method. But I will say it does add cost. And whether that cost is upfront or in the end on either project, it does add cost. You get more staff. There's a lot more team members a CM brings to the project than a DBB. Those salaries have to be paid for. You have estimating, that has to be paid for. We have logistics, scheduling, and planning. The scheduler has to be paid for during the job. So these are services that you're being provided, but they're also services you're paying for. When establishing the estimates, there are a number of what we call holds and allowances that are established in a CM at risk project. Those holds and allowances do not exist in a DBB job. The estimate is the estimate. The owner's contingency is the owner's contingency. In a GMP contingent, in a CM estimate, there's also a GMP contingency. This is in addition to the owner's contingency. So we always have an owner's contingency regardless of CM or DBB, but on a CM project, there's also a GMP contingency. That adds cost. Whether or not you spend it all, it comes back to you. But in the initial exercise, in the initial estimate, therefore in the initial price asked of your residents, that additional GMP contingency is in there. And there is a loss of competition on the GCs and the GRs, and the general conditions is the staffing. It is the labor that is required to produce a job. And the general requirements are everything from the trailers to a carpenter, to safety, to PPE, to temporary toilets. Every single one of those items is budgeted in a CM at risk project. In a DBB, you don't see that, but it's in the project because it's a contractual requirement to obligate it. But you pay for everything and you see it up front, and a CM will make sure that there's enough money in there to try and assume any missed scope, which goes to some commentary about why there's no change orders. I will say every CM project I have has change orders. I have not had a CM project that does not have change orders. And I have not had a CM project where some of the change orders do not come out of the owner's contingency. So some change orders are a drawdown of the hold, some are a drawdown of an allowance, some are a drawdown of an owner's contingency, and some are a drawdown of the GMP contingency. But at the end of the day, I have not had a CM project that is zero change order. So I just want to make that clear. Can we go to the next slide, please, Kristen? So why DBB for Concord Middle School? As I said, we do not approach a project and say this must be a CM or this must be a DBB project. It's based on the project itself. Is it complex? Does it require early bid packages? Concord Middle School does not require early bid packages. We are building free and clear of the existing school as we've done with many projects. The site logistics are straightforward. We can separate students and construction. We can separate the traffic for the buses entering the site. It is not an occupied renovation. We don't need to put up temporary walls over a weekend and realign fire alarm devices so that when the kids come back on a Monday, they have a new route within the building. We've done that on projects and it requires a CM. It requires a CM to be planning that ahead of time with you and looking at the best ways to do that. This project does not require that. So we do not feel that it is warranted for this project. If it is if the committee feels it is warranted, I will tell you that we will ask and inform you that this is an additional cost that we need to put in the estimate to cover the additional services that it brings. So you need to pay for those services, and they're not in the current estimate. If you feel that's warranted as a committee, we can certainly update the estimates. We do not feel as design professionals and as your OPM that it is necessary for this project based on our experience and our long experience doing schools in the state of Massachusetts. Thank you, Kristen.
Great, so that was just the recap and the summary of the last months of work and most recent adjustments as well. So I think now we'll hand it back off to the co-chairs to continue with number 6 on the agenda.
Great, thank you, Kristen and Lorraine. I guess at this point, I'm going to ask that everyone recognize that a lot of information has been shared with you as far as, you know, answers to questions, information, updates. There's a lot out there. So I will look to recognize anyone with questions, comments, motions. We're at a point where it's really critical that we make decisions and move this project forward for the sake of the success of the project. I think, you know, in a lot of ways, there have been some strong feelings and debate, which has been healthy, and we appreciate that over the last couple of months, and hope that through some sort of recognition today of what the budget and scope will include and which delivery method this project will move forward with, will get us over this hurdle to see success for this project. So with that, I'm going to open it up to committee members. Would anyone like to say anything, ask anything?
Dawn, I have a point of order. This is Charlie.
Sure. Hi, Charlie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would suggest that we think about separating the questions from the comments and discussion phase. I think we ought to get everybody on the same page on the questions first, get the information out there, get things clarified before we move into how people feel about it and how people, want to question others about their thoughts. So that's what I think we should do.
Okay. I am willing to entertain that as a point of order. So you're specifically referencing the Q&A, the questions that were asked a week ago today, and then the answers that were provided. Is that correct?
What I'm referencing is if people want to ask questions, they should ask them.
I see. Live today. Got it.
Answer them live today and get through that, whether it's a reclarification of what was written or whether it's something new. Let's get those out of the way.
Okay. I appreciate that. So with that, let's open this up to any questions. Anything anyone's unsure about, needs clarification on.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about both the size and scope as well as the CM versus DBB?
Yep. So let's take questions on the scope. Actually, yeah. I think I'd prefer to take questions on the scope and budget first, being that was presented first, and then construction delivery method. We'll take questions on scope and budget. We'll take questions on DBD. Then we'll have discussion on scope and budget, discussion on, sorry, not DBD, construction delivery method. So let's do it that way. So any questions on the budget and scope? Yes, Court.
Yeah, I made a request of our chairs in an email yesterday after I read the responses by Hill to the questions, and I want to apologize for copying the committee. That was not my intention. Bad protocol, so forgive me and thank you for not replying. I did pick up some items relative to budget that I hope I could get a little more clarity on. Before we brought in our Hill and SMMA folks, when we were still bringing this forward to town meeting, we were using a cost escalator of 7 to 9%. We all recall that. Right now, we're coming out of a pandemic, hopefully with a recovery and an infusion of infrastructure money. And I do think that predictions for the future are legitimate. I'm curious if the 7 to 9 figure actually should remain so constant, or whether we need to give ourselves more of a margin for uncertainties. A question about budget relative to construction method is we know that SMMA doesn't have a bias, nor does Hill, but we do see a very emphatic recommendation for this project today. I'm looking at a 5 to 9% cost for CMR, but in much of the information that I've been able to obtain from the School Building Assistance Authority, I see a 2 to 5% initial cost, which sounds different to me than a 5 to 9% cost. And so any way that folks can help me unravel that that understanding would be helpful.
Thank you, Court. Anyone have comments or answers or clarifications for Court? I'm looking at our professionals. Lorraine, yes. Kristen's nodding her head. Feel free to take it, guys.
So just on the escalation, I will say that there's quite a bit of concern right now on steel. The price of steel has gone through the roof. The restrictions for Canadian steel is really causing some concerns. The Associated General Contractors of America and of Massachusetts sent out keep everyone updated. And recently there was an update that the price of steel is significantly going up. I will say we have a steel bid coming in soon. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers. I don't think you were suggesting to lower it, Court, and I hope that wasn't the recommendation, because I would not suggest lowering it at this point.
By no means, no. I'm looking for protection.
Yep. So, you know, one of the things, and I'm just going to throw it out there because I did Alcott and I did Thoreau, is that the town had a separate bidding contingency for those projects back in the day, and I don't know if people know that. So there was, the escalation was into the project as it normally would be, but there was real uncertainty in the markets in 2000 when we did those jobs. And the town applied a separate bidding contingency only that would only be used for any difference in the bid at the time of bid. And as soon as the bid was awarded, that money went away. So it couldn't be used for scope additions in the future. It couldn't be used for change orders. We still had our contingency for change orders. So I'm not sure we'd want to raise the escalation because we are expecting some materials to come down. I think steel is the biggest concern we've got going right now. There are labor shortages, which are driving cost increases a lot. And I will say, just even because of COVID restrictions, we're seeing manpower reductions a little bit on some of our jobs because of separation. And, you know, if we've had cases on our job sites where someone has had corona and then it's sent down the entire team for testing, and then they have to wait for the results to come back. So we've seen productivity issues. I'm hoping that by the time this project is being built, that we'll be all past that, and that the vaccines will work, and we won't need to count for that. So I think our escalation, I'm comfortable with our escalation the way it is, but I do think that, you know, maybe the town considers a separate bidding contingency only for that purpose, as you did in the past. On the MSBA, I'm not sure where you find the information about the 2 to 3%. Court, the MSBA did a very detailed analysis back in.
Forgive me. I meant 2 to 5 was what I had seen. I'm sorry.
Okay, and where did you see that, or were you just doing the math based on the capital pipeline?
One was a presentation that MSBA hosted, in fact, included folks from your organization. I'd have to pull it up and show you, but,
okay.
And you know, I'm not declaring these numbers are exact. I'm simply trying to learn, is there a middle between these extremes that I'm seeing? Because I'm looking at 2 to 9, and it seems quite wide to me.
So if I could jump in, Lorraine?
Yeah.
First of all, Lorraine's point is very well made. I'm on the Arlington Permanent Town Building Committee. We recently bid a job that because of, and it was a CMAR, but that is not part of this at all. It came in extremely over budgeted bid a couple of weeks ago. And through the analysis we've done over the last 2 weeks, it was based almost entirely on the price of steel, lumber, and PVC as regards to what's been happening with COVID and plant shutdowns and what happened in Texas during all the bad weather down there regarding PVC. There's been an extreme spike a major spike of, like, say 30% in steel, and in some cases 100% on lumber. It's a crystal ball 3 years from now, you know, but it seems to me as though, as we've looked going back from the 70s and 80s when I got started up until today, to take a long view, the percentages we're carrying, I feel, are consistent and reasonable for this particular project. The other thing is on the CM at risk cost, we did a little illustration because it's really hard, Court and everybody, to put our finger on this cost difference, which has been seen to be real. I know there was a general AGC and a CMAR type of contractor meeting that was held 5-6 years ago, so that the CMAR people could kind of put their voice forward on cost increases. I was a general contractor for 30 years before becoming an OPM, and I've dealt with this. I've argued both sides depending on the project. What we're seeing and what I have seen over the history is this 7 to 9 to 10 or higher % is based upon several factors, and there's differing studies compared to who does them. So I think Lorraine did a good job explaining where those differences are. I will also say that in the CMAR bidding world, there's more and more people in the last 5 years since the last time some of these studies happened. The fields have really changed, and there's a lot of more people going after the DVB work. Those particular subcontractors in the CMAR world, everything is basically the same on the bidding on the filed subtrades. On the non-filed subbidders, which you could kind of think of as the general contractors subs, we're seeing that there's a difference there between the DVB and the CMAR. So there's a lot of factors.
Thank you, Peter.
And just to add, I've heard the bias comment, I just want to reiterate Lorraine and SMN's point, in that we've done both. We're perfectly happy to do either one.
Thank you, Peter. Does that answer your question, Court? Questions?
Yeah, it does. Quick follow-up.
Sure.
We have a 555 number. Should I assume that doesn't assume a construction method and kind of splits the difference?
Since the start, we had been figuring all of our estimates based upon the design bid build.
Okay.
I mean, we hadn't carried, in other words, we hadn't carried what we thought would be, and what we've seen in the history of the bidding of these things, any increase for either hiring a CMAR or the cost of the pre-construction.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So I've got a hand up here, and I just wanted to get back to the building scope question. So, and my question really is that when it comes to the gymnasium, we've had a kind of a sketch of what the impact would be on the conceptual design. But when it comes to the auditorium, we've had a lot of focus on what the increased scope would do to the parking. But I haven't ever seen a picture of, well, what does it do to increase the size of the auditorium to the overall shape of the building? I mean, it seems like it's right there in the middle. So does it really, create problems to expand this? Again, I'm not trying to have someone pull out a sheet of paper and a pencil right now, but I have architects looked at that, and are they comfortable that if we expand that, it doesn't impact the overall design?
Thanks, Matt. Kristen, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so we do have a little bit of room to move using the same exact layout. We have a little bit of room to move in the western direction if the auditorium footprint were to grow and we retain everything otherwise. There are, however, also some ideas on some potential shifts that would pull things off of that base floor plate and move them down or up to also balance the building and maybe keep the same footprint as it is. So there's a lot of work that happens in schematic design. We have a lot of schematic design programming with teachers and the administration to talk about where everything is. Even in that process, there will be shifts, based on feedback of where the art rooms are preferred or where the administration offices are preferred. So the concepts are by no means a final floor plan, and we do a really deep dive again to work the space to be responsive to the educators and the building committee's concerns. So what you've seen so far will continue to be developed, and whatever the direction is provided today, we'll provide the best floor plan for that.
So you're not concerned about the constraints here that this would impose? Okay.
Not concerned.
So, Kristen, is it fair to say, following up on Matt's question, for the committee members, that when we think about the scope and changing the size of the gym or the auditorium, that we're really thinking more about the costs than the impact it would have on the design, that it's doable, all of the all of the suggestions that you've made, but it's really the cost we need to focus on.
Well, but we have talked about various design impacts like parking on the site.
Okay, parking, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and also coverage area. I mean, although it sounds like we're well within here at this point, but I thought there could be.
Yeah, the coverage area, I think everyone saw in the detailed breakout that if you go with the two MIA cross courts and the 550 seat auditorium, that would be pushing the 15%, assuming everything else remains the same, but it's only by 0.1%. So, you know, again, through schematic design, that could be worked out if that were the preferred, but it is a tight site and we don't want to overinflate or over design. You know, we want to hear what the community is asked and what you find to be responsible and proceed with that. But yeah, we don't see any major limitations other than, of course, addressing parking, which I think, you know, parking is always an issue for the one-off events. You know, we never design parking for the few events that happen each year. You know, parking is designed for the typical use of the building. And then there's overflow that happens on major events always.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry, Peter. Just one comment before we move on from that. I just want to be really clear. I think you might have said it, but I was saying goodbye to my kids. The potential increase to both the gym and the auditorium would not affect the educational spaces. I want to be really clear that that is sacred and doesn't. So anything that would adjust or moved is sort of the size of the corridor or the proportions of the auditorium, which we know become critical to acoustics and whatnot. So just for those who are here today and maybe haven't been following along, I think we've said that before. Our designers have said that before, but I want to be sure to make that clear. So yes, Peter, let's move on.
Yeah, so my question is about our options for choices. So having been involved with a lot of these projects, the school projects and other projects in town, I've never seen such an outpouring of support for a particular issue, except maybe when we tried to outsource the buses. Is it feasible that we could give the community an option for the bigger gym and the bigger auditorium and have them vote on it? I know the committee's charge is to come up with a design. I'm curious as to what would be involved in giving that option to let the town decide at town meeting as an option. So could somebody answer that?
You know, this, if I could just start with, this is a kind of a two-part question to me. The committee's been charged to make a recommendation to the town manager and to the town on the design of the building. And so we have a responsibility, and we have been listening and getting the bulk of the information over the last, seems like 3 years, but maybe it's not been 3 years, but it's been a long time. We've gotten a lot of information. The committee was formed of people who we believed, the town believed could listen to this information and make some informed decisions. So that's just one side of it. Then the other side of it is, what are the logistics of if we decided we wanted to turn this over to the town to make a decision? So, you know, I think that Kristen can speak to the logistics from the point of view of the process of building this building. But then there's also, I think, perhaps Stephen can talk about the process of having the town make that decision, as you suggest, Peter.
So if I may, Don, with that, I think I'd like to make a couple of points on this. Peter, in terms to your point, the town meeting is going to vote on a warrant article. Okay, that's the ultimate way that the town meeting says yes or no is a warrant article to move forward with the exclusion vote. And so how you would structure a debt exclusion vote with design options, I don't know how that could work. Alternatively, you could have a sense of the town meeting, you know, kind of non-binding resolution saying, this is what we want, but I'll be honest and say, I don't think that gets you any more than you had through the survey. And so I think to take a step back, I said a couple of weeks ago that in my mind, this was really a discussion about budget, not about spaces. And so that's why when Carrie LaFleur and I were developing the FAQs about financing, I went back and said, what is the real budget? We had been kind of going with a guideline, if you will, of 80 to 100 million. So I wasn't here when that was set, so I went back to the outstanding MMN YouTube channel, which has all of the content you could possibly need for town meetings, and watched the debate on Article 14 from 2019 town meeting. And I heard clearly the superintendent talk about 90 million as an illustrative number because we didn't really have information to make the decision on. And then I also heard the discussion clearly frame out that that number would be subject to escalation for each passing year. So when I was crafting the FAQs about what is the budget, I just took the information that, and then we went with what are the cost escalators that our professionals who do know what they're doing are seeing on similar projects, and we said 6 to 8%. So doing the math, 90 million times 6% a year, or 6 to 8% a year times 3 years. Really, it's not 2 years; it's going to end up being 3 years. That's 98 to 108 million. And so, to me, the question remains: how do we view the project budget based on what town meeting approved in 2019, and what can we get for that number? And that's the thing I think that we should be debating, because I think it's been made clear from some of the options analysis that SMMA has performed. If we accept that the budget is 98 to 108, and 108 would be a not to exceed amount, we could probably accommodate larger spaces on both fronts. And then the question is, where's the sweet spot for both the gym and the auditorium to fit within that? So that's not an endorsement of one space over the other, or even endorsement for larger spaces on either account, because like I said, I think our charge was initially a building that meets the educational plan. That's just, we've been having this battle about spaces versus budget, and if we really look at the budget and what we told town meeting, we may not need to have a binary choice. So I guess that's a long way of saying I think I still remain convinced that our discussion really should be about the budget.
I appreciate that, Stephen, because when it boils down to it, that's ultimately what we're, the best that we can put forward is a building that meets the educational need and supports the community within a budget that we are comfortable agreeing to. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate. I agree with that to some extent, but I also think that as a community member, when I voted for that, right, we didn't really have a school to vote on. We didn't have the spaces. We had the educational plan, right? And now we've seen the design, and the community is weighing in. So as to a few things that they feel are very important. So I just think that we have to keep that in mind. The budget obviously is paramount, but now that we really know what we're talking about, that something that the community is weighing in on.
I understand that, Peter. I think what my point is, it's possible we can accomplish some of those goals and stay within the budget that we told town meeting was going to be the approximate cost of the school. Like I said, I think that I had been under a false assumption that 100 million was set as kind of a hard cap. I think that was kind of mentioned probably in a series of meetings as, the ballpark, but the factors that were laid out in 2019 during that discussion about what would this cost were clear. And I went back and so I could hear them firsthand, and it's math. And now, as everyone here knows, the cost of the building is what you get on bid opening day. That's what the building costs. But for planning purposes, and I do believe that we are taking a conservative approach towards our estimating. You know, can we accommodate a larger gym space and a larger auditorium within the $98 to $108 million budget? That is, in fact, what was told to town meeting, plus escalation in 2019. And again, I think we've seen that it may be yes, maybe not everybody getting everything they want, but getting certainly more than we have on the table at 7,000 square feet and 250 seats. I definitely think there's room to grow from those two numbers. Based on the A, B, C, D options. So like I said, I think I'm trying to get this, instead of, you know, space wars, let's just say, what do we have on the table? What do we have at our disposal to plan and program and go from there? And like I said, I would think that we would want to set at this stage, we would want to agree as a committee, this is the cap. You know, if you want to call it 108 million, whatever, call it 100 million. It's up to the committee to decide. But let's set a cap and then see what we can get within that cap.
The survey talked about fundraising efforts. Have there been any follow-ups on that? Is there any money coming in towards these objectives beyond the town's funding through bonds?
I can answer briefly. Coming in, no, not yet. So there's some initial interest, but basically, you know, in the week since last week, we don't have any clarity yet on, you know, would there actually be enough fundraising to support all of this? So that's something that we can continue to follow up on if needed. But there was no way to actually get a funding commitment within a week.
Thanks.
So Peter, are you satisfied your questions were answered or addressed as best we could? Can we move on to, I see we have another hand up.
Yes, good.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have picked up. I'm on a Zoom call.
Thanks. Following up on Lorraine Finnegan's and Peter Martini's comments, and also our town manager, Stephen Crane, and thinking about a budget cap. Given that we have feelings, but we're trying to move toward better accuracy and clarity as much as we can at this stage, is it fair to think about really not an upper limit of 108 million, but maybe preparing the town to look at 110 million when we finish schematic design and we present this at town meeting? Just a thought for the committee to ponder if we think of a possible upper limit. And if we end up less than that, we're in an acceptable range.
Are there any other questions?
Court's hand is up, Pat.
Oh, okay. Gordon?
Yeah, just very quickly, my question, I think, follows on Chris's remarks. I believe that Stephen, your estimates and Carrie's coming in at 98 to 108, using the inflation, the escalation index, similar to Hill's, has their number still coming in at 100. If I read question 9 correct in their document of yesterday afternoon. So I think that kind of uncertainty is an argument for fiscal sustainability notwithstanding, protecting the project, or at least debating it, as Chris suggested, because these are two numbers that have come at us within the last 24 hours, and there's a considerable variance, if I'm correct.
Well, I guess I think we worked on our documents independently. Carrie and I obviously focused on the the mechanics of financing and also the PB reuse was a part of that document as well. And I'll be honest, I have to give Jared some credit for authorship here too, because, I think he was the one who helped develop that presentation in 2019. And so I consulted him really as a part of that number, but I do think it's consistent with what was said at town meeting. And so, Corey, I'm a process guy. What did we say when the vote was taken? What did town meeting voters think they were voting on? That's really important to me. But then let's stick with that. And Peter Fishalis, I hear you on that. And I think the feedback is, I don't say overwhelming, but the feedback is consistent and voluminous. And I don't mean loud, I mean just a lot of it. And people are saying we'd pay more. And would everybody pay more? I don't know, but there's a fair number of people who are saying we'd pay more instead of sacrifice the ed plan for these things. And I think that's a pretty strong sign that I guess it's a pretty strong sign that people still continue to support the funding for the school. And again, extrapolating those numbers, at 108, if like I said, you put a cap in at 108, 110 doesn't, it doesn't. I don't say it doesn't matter. It matters greatly. But for the during schematic design, we would go through that exercise, I think, Peter, about kind of looking at different options and sliding the scale back and forth between gym size and auditorium and then the other spaces. And we would hopefully end up at, depending on what the market does, at a lesser number.
If I can just add to that, if you wouldn't mind, just a few things. What I did is, we just looked into the cost escalation. The 6 to 8%, the unknowns, as Lorraine said, every year things change with, what's going up, what's going down. She mentioned steel. The other thing that I'm hearing that is skyrocketed is the price of wood. So that's going up. I also think it's important to mention, I think many of you or some of you know about the potential recent savings that we've been working on for the high school with our bond advisor. We have the potential to refinance and potentially save the two towns $3 million plus on the high school. So the point of that is it's fluid. Things could change. The number that we know now, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, could change. So I just thought that was important to point out.
Great job. Saved $3 million. Good. That's great news.
Can I just ask
Peter.
a question? So first of all, for clarification, is what I heard from Stephen, it sounds like rather than us deciding on an actual design, we decide on a maximum budget and then let our professionals go to work and see what they can do with that. And if we can squeeze in bigger gyms and bigger auditorium, that's great. So I want to clarify that. Then the follow-up question for the professionals is, if we are trying to navigate through that, is a CM going to provide value in that analysis and that those trade-offs versus a DBB?
So I can say that the CM would only be coming on board during design development phase, which is after the vote. So they certainly wouldn't be able to assist with anything during schematic design. And I'll also say that in general, while the CM becomes a very valuable part of the team, we do estimates, an independent estimator does estimates, and we have our independent QC that happens. So I think while they definitely help with logistics and those complex, site planning and scheduling aspects of the project, the design and the estimating is fairly consistent. Our estimators have same access to that steel price increase that Lorraine mentioned. We all get those as design professionals, and so do the estimators. So I will say for this phase, the CM wouldn't even be on board. And then for subsequent phases, the value they add is really around complexity and constructability and not budget or design per se.
Also, Kristen, don't we, have to, regardless of what budget target we set, give you something to shoot for a conceptual, for a schematic design. We can't just say, hey, see what you could fit in. I mean, you actually have to design something.
Yes, and the legwork done by the committee and with input from the community has been vast. I think that, we wouldn't be coming back to you with anything other than what we presented on the gym, which is the direct input we got about the size of the practice courts. That work has been done. So that is truly, your option of that or the 2 MIAA, and we just don't hear a need for the 2 MIAA cross courts. So
the thing is, we have to give you guidance. We can't just say, here's the money, go figure it out.
Correct.
But it
questions come back to you.
Yeah, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, sounds like the 10,600, which is the 76 by 46, I'm losing track of numbers in my head, but the 70 some odd, the cross courts that are not MIAA, but large enough to be practice courts that are subdividable, with the full MIAA as the competition court, the main court, 10,600, do I have that right? Plus, at a minimum, 350 seats could fit within the window of budget that I think we're talking about. So in my mind, that lays out a scenario where there's compromises, but recognition of community needs that potentially could be worth thinking about.
Yes.
And just for my clarification, so if the committee were to vote a budget today and we knew what our budget was going to be, and we really know solidly what the community has pushed for the school, we could come up with a design, but at schematic, it could expand a bit. Or if we got to where, we can do this and it's 103 million but we really want more seats in the auditorium, or we really want more space. Is there a place along the path that we could make those decisions?
Well, can I comment on that?
Yeah.
I got it, because it's a design question. I understand, but from a process standpoint, you have to move forward. You have to move forward in schematic design. It's a very specific process. You need to be specific, otherwise you're just wasting time and money. Okay. And we don't want to do that. So what I think is, if we had conceivably a design, a budget cap that guided schematic design, and we all know that SMMA and Hill have heard the feedback. They know that there's a lot of demand for increased spaces in the gymnasium, the auditorium, but not at the expense of the ed plan. That's kind of I think there's strong consensus on this committee that we want to be able to accommodate all of that. If we get to the end of SD, and given the changes, we're designing a building in a pandemic and a shifting global economic climate, and supply chain that is really destabilized in ways that it probably hasn't been in a number that I've seen anyway in my years of doing projects. But if we get to the end of SD and it turns out the cap wasn't good enough, then you would have to go, you would maybe go to the community and say, to go into design development and move to this next phase, or move to fund the project, we're actually going to need 115 to get what we want. And if the committee decides let's move forward with that, and we hear from the community that they'd rather vote for 115 million, and I'm making numbers up, please don't quote me on that. That's when town meeting votes on it. Town meeting votes on that when we go for the debt exclusion, and it's either going to have enough in it to get the building that I think we all envision, or based on financial and economic considerations at that time, it won't. And then at that point, you may have to spend some money on redesign and doing it, but it'll be needed anyway. It won't be kind of good money after bad, like I think we'd be doing now by doing various iterations of design. It would be much more purposeful and focused. So that's where I think we would have that built-in circuit breaker on this, to see if we get to that point and we don't have what we need, we could revisit it.
I have a question also when you finish that one. This is Charlie.
Hi, Charlie, go ahead. I think we're good on that topic. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
So my question is, do we still have an opportunity to sharpen the pencil on the requirements for gym space? I hear the request for the two larger cross courts, and I understand those. And I've also studied the documents relative to run out and space, additional space to the curtain in the center and so forth. So I understand all of that. You know, we have incremented that space with a foot here, a foot there, and 4 feet here and so forth. And I think we all probably recognize that. And that adds up. So the question, I guess, is, are we doing a little bit more than what we really need to do? And have we really examined that requirement carefully? I know CCYB has probably made a very articulate request, but the question has to do, for example, with the cross court. If you look in the documentation on standard basketball court sizes for junior high school, they are 42 by 74. And if you want to go Google that, you'll find, you know, it comes up time and time and time again. Now we have one full cross court in there. I'm sorry, one full MIA high school level regulation court. But you could also get the two smaller cross courts in there, slightly smaller, 42 by 74. And you could save quite a bit of square footage by, you know, skinnying that down and cutting back on some of the increases in those buffers. You know, and I know I don't mean to be penny pinching here, but you know, if we could skinny this down, we could come in with a more conservative number. And I'm just wondering, do we have an opportunity to sharpen the pencil on this and do that kind of work and reduce the incremental costs that we're going to put forth for this expansion? I guess that's the question.
During schematic design, we do schematic design programming, which is the next level down of interviews and information gathering. So at that time, if those involved on the gym development were to say that they have more comfort on different run out areas or different dimensioning, then we can definitely do that. But we will be designing to parameters that are set here. So, you know, our starting point we would want to know here and now if we're looking at the practice courts as proposed most recently by CCYB, or if you are targeting the two MIAA courts. So again, the refinements will happen on all of the spaces as we start to put in placeholders for shafts and stairs and all that circulation. But we do need the parameters.
I wasn't really asking about the two MIAA courts. I was talking about the 10,000 square foot CCYB proposal and whether we could sharpen the pencils on that and cut that down and therefore reduce the amount of incremental outlay that we need to commit to today or commit to shortly.
Again, if we get information that is different during the SD programming and it shrinks that space, then yes, but for now we need to assume what we have is accurate for today's purpose. And we do due diligence to go back and get updated and current data and review everything.
Chris Popov, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Questions on spaces. Are there changes that we can think about now and work out through schematic design that would change the outline, the main footprint of the core team spaces and still retain the space allocation, complement the ed plan and make sure that works, have the spaces there, but really rethink what that main part of the building looks like in order to have more space flexibility for the other things we're talking about, auditorium, gym, and also keeping within that 15% cap. Those are things I think we ought to think about very seriously, because if we change that perimeter, we also gain on energy efficiency and we're more comfortably able to keep within budget to meet the net zero goal as well. So those are the kinds of things I suspect probably both Lorraine and Kristen would say worked out in schematic design, and the design folks and our committee would be looking at very carefully during schematic design. So when we come up with a plan for the town, we're looking at a really nice looking perimeter for the entire project.
That is correct. Those would be schematic design discussions and developments.
Peter, you have another question?
Yeah, so I guess a question for Kristen. If we're looking to move forward with something, what is the harm in moving forward with the option D, bigger gym, bigger auditorium, working that out, seeing what that cost is, comes back in, and then if we have to, if it's not meeting the budget, we then rework it.
So it will be additional design if a redesign is required. So the additional design fee and cost, and also time associated with that redo. And as we all know, the longer we wait, the more escalation gets added, which has an adverse effect on getting to the budget. So, just even this past year, we've seen not only are we in fairly tumultuous times with the estimates, but this is 1 year later, and we applied that extra year of escalation to the costs. So I think that the risk of time and design fee is paramount, but also you mentioned that a budget, and so I think that we would need to hear that established. And we frequently design to budgets. As you saw, we brought to you the educational plan fitting within the budget parameters that we were given to the 100 million. With schematic design, for example, if the budget were 108 million, we would come in both with the design based on the parameters that everyone states here and a value engineering list, so that if the estimates come in high, there's not only the opportunity, what Stephen said, where you could increase the budget, but also where you could maintain the budget by realizing some value engineering options.
Which could be a smaller auditorium and a smaller gym?
No, value engineering is typically around materials and things.
Okay.
Looks like Court has his hand up, and I think I'm going to call on Court and then ask for construction delivery method questions in order to keep the conversation going. Not to say we're not willing to keep discussing it. It's just I want to be cognizant of time and additional discussion that needs to happen. So, Court.
Yeah, I'll be brief.
Excellent, thanks.
If our design team found themselves in a real quandary around trying to maintain a budget target and expand gym and auditorium, would it be feasible to look at two areas in the space summary that we did not look at all? We know that the educational plan and the teaming is off limits. That's something we're going to protect at all costs. But what we've never discussed is the bridge, which is an architectural feature that I've seen with estimates going all the way up to close to 3 million, although I'm not qualified to say what the real number is for that beautiful architectural feature. But would it be in play? I don't know. I'm not advocating it. But this is my first and last opportunity to ask this question. And secondly, we never looked at non-instructional space in a critical way. The working assumption, I believe, was that that non-instructional space, admin space and so on, really represented people who needed certain kinds of dedicated space, and it was personnel driven. But it too wasn't examined. So I would simply put the question forward: if you're in a real pickle with this problem solving, would you or we re-examine those two items? And I don't need an answer now. It could just be a rhetorical question on my part if you wish. But again, last chance I can voice it, I think, before we try to move ahead.
Yeah, I can say that the administrative spaces and the non-educational were reviewed a number of times based on staffing and everything with the school, understanding that's not something that would be informed by other constituents, but we did review those and we'll continue to, because changes do occur, and we'll stay on top of that with the school department. And then related to the bridge, if between last year and this year, The world languages classrooms were added to the 3rd floor, for example, and that made a double stack bridge. We're going to continue with design refinements, and it will continue to evolve. But right now, the bridge and all the program spaces are within the net square foot plus the 1.5 multiplier. So it is within a circulation space that would otherwise realize itself some other way. So even if it's not there as that element, it is within the 142,995 program. So it would still manifest itself just differently.
Thank you.
Great. So if it's okay, I'd like to move on to construction delivery method questions. So we can have that discussion and then look to entertain any motions anyone might have on the 2 different topics. So construction delivery method questions. No, I don't have a crystal ball if you need that answer. I'm just kidding. Heather, did you put your hand up?
I did. I will ask a question. It's kind of a high level one, which is made possible by all the detail. First of all, I just want to say quickly, all the detail that was provided over the past week, just incredible, and presented last week and then answering the questions in between. Can't tell you how helpful it's been. So I know that was a lot of work on a lot of people's parts. Thank you. The question is kind of the high level one. We've heard comments about, this being biased, or why did the professionals want DBB? And I will be honest, as I've come into this and listened to all these feedback, I have been torn for multiple weeks on this, kind of leaning towards all the CMAR comments, but wondering why would we really go DBB, and wondering why would we go DBB if all of these comments are leaning that way. And I feel like through the past couple weeks, the answer to that question has become, it is about cost savings. And I was trying to figure out also, kind of why are the professionals recommending DBB? At first, the answer seemed like it was because we don't need the other, but I was still torn with, but why DBB? And I guess my question is kind of making sure that I'm understanding clearly. What I'm hearing today and over the past week is that it is really all about cost savings. This is a question about budget. And so my takeaway from today, unless I'm mistaken, is the recommendation for DBB is primarily because it will save us significant dollars. And I guess whether that's 2 or 9 or somewhere in between, if we're saying, $5 or $6 million, that's significant. So am I correct in that? Is that the real reason for the recommendation for DBB? Is it really about the budget?
Can I?
Go ahead, Lorraine. Yep.
I guess I would say back to you, Heather, why not DBB? We have a lot of very successful DBB projects. We had a high school in North Middlesex that we designed as LEED Silver. With the DBB, we achieved LEED Gold, no additional cost. There are very good DBB contractors.
Right.
But there are additional services you get with a CM. And the question is, do you need those services? And if you need those services, you need to pay for those services.
Right.
So you're asking a contractor to build a project. The project can come in at one price, but if you want all these additional services, it's going to be a different price.
Right.
So do we need those services? Do they add value to the project? So it isn't just about the price. You're getting something for that price. You're getting service. And is that service warranted? So it's, you get what you pay for, right?
Right.
And if you don't need something, every time I go to Valvoline, they try and do something else around my car. And I'm like, no, I don't need that service. I just came in for an oil change, please. If I wanted to have my, all my grease done and everything else done, I'd pay more for it because they're doing something.
Right.
So, but if I don't need it done and I just want the oil change, I just want to pay for my oil change.
And you're saying that we don't need those services, so let's not pay for something we don't need.
You're getting them.
Opinion, we don't need those services.
Sorry, Lorraine. And you're getting a lot of them from either the architect OPM or when the job starts at DBB. I just want to mention one other thing. Apart from this sort of pejorative ranking of general contractors to the big and the good and the small and the not so good. I would point out there was a very good point made by either Mr. Salemi or Mr. Bates regarding attracting the contractors and who you're going to attract and who's not going to touch the project. And I would just add that the surety, the requirements for surety in Massachusetts are a big important factor here. On the larger projects, whether they are, quote, a job that's kind of standard like this one, that doesn't require a lot of ancillary phasing, traffic, working right in the middle of a community, which we've done, phasing, temporary work. Apart from that, there's size, just sheer size. And if this, I would venture to say that if this was a $200 million job, we would probably be maybe recommending something else, because there's only so many contractors out there who can achieve bonding of $200 million. It's not like insurance. It's something that you've built up over years, and you've built up a net worth and a reputation in the industry that allows you to get bonds that size. When you're under $100 million, and actually the number's going more, even up a little bit over 100, almost all of the contractors have that bonding ability. So you're not limiting yourself on the bonding end. So size does matter in some instances, just particularly because of the bonding.
Matt, I see your hand up. Matt Root.
Thank you, Pat. I guess I just wanted to follow up on Heather's comments. And Heather, I really appreciate how you framed it there. I guess to continue that exploration, in my mind, one of the values, Lorraine, that you mentioned that CM at Risk would bring is risk management. I mean, it's in the name of the delivery mechanism. And I'd love feedback from the team on the fact that by going DBB, we would be taking on a little bit more risk, at least in my opinion. And there's savings associated with taking on that risk, and that DBB could come back less expensive. But we would be opening up ourselves to the potential for more risk, has been suggested by some others.
Don, could I storytell to answer that maybe?
You sure can.
I was on a CMR project in my last district, a very, very respected contractor that we worked really well with. There's no such thing though as no risk. We were under budget all the way until demo. So the kids are in the school and we're under budget, feeling really good. And then demo goes totally south with all sorts of surprises. And within months, we're sitting with them saying, they're looking at us saying, we don't know if we can stay. We don't know if we've got enough contingency. You may need to be going back to the town to get this building down. Now we eked it out, but we did. The other story I'll tell is there was a lot of value engineering that went on to open that school. And a year later, we were retrofitting air conditioning in the cafeteria. So there is no such thing as no risk. I just think it's so important to say that. And that was a really well done project. CM contractor we all thought very highly of. There's just no such thing. So I tend to want to be sure we don't assume that it takes all the risk off of the project. That's just not the case.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lori. And I'm not suggesting there's no risk. I think it's the level of risk. And I mean, there is a value and there is a reason why projects go CM at risk. And in my mind, one of those is that it takes a little, the CM takes on more risk of the project.
So I can address that, and I'm going to be a little bit flippant, and I say that there's two misnomers with CM at risk. There is no guaranteed maximum price, and there is no CM at risk. The owner has risk no matter which way you do a delivery. It is your project, it is your site, it is your building. You own the risk, no matter which contractor you go with. how we mitigate risk under CM is partly why you'll see that the upfront costs show more. We have more in holds, we have more in allowances. In public construction, you are not permitted to have allowances unless you go CM at risk. So Chapter 149A was the venue that allowed public projects to have an allowance. So we could put a pot of money in the CM estimate that says, we're not sure if we're going to have more asbestos than we think we're going to have. So we're going to carry an allowance for $500,000 in case we hit more asbestos that we don't know about. We cannot do that in 149. There's no, by law, you cannot carry that 500,000. So CM at risk gives you the mechanism to put that pot of money over here. That's why the owner's contingency sometimes is a little different on the percentage on a CM, because if we've already carried all these buckets of money over here in the CM estimate, do we need to have the same level in the owner's contingency? So the risk is just where you put it at the beginning of the job, Matt, to be honest. And that's why our opinion, and I've worked on, I don't know how many GMPs at this point, we have buckets of money everywhere in our GMPs to account for unknowns, unbought scope, risk. But at the end of the day, it's still your money. It's still the town's money. It's just we're telling you this cost is higher because we've put all this, and I'm not saying we're padding the estimate, but we've put all this risk in this bucket. On a DBB, the risk is below in the owner's contingency. It's still there. It's just where you put it, which is what drives our conversation as to why the estimate is higher on a CM versus a DBB, because it's in there above the bottom line number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand all that. I guess I think back to Heather's point of it took her a while to figure out that, and sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth, Heather, but that it took her a little while to figure out that this is all about budget and costs right now. And I guess I think we need to get that on the table and make sure that we're all recognizing that.
And I would add that
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add that it's about services, whether or not you need to pay for additional services, because you get something for those services.
Yeah, right. Clearly you do, because there are projects that do it and find those values. And I guess my comment would be, I think we want to make sure that we're being honest and fair about identifying all those services and then recognizing that we don't want to take those on.
Yeah, Lorraine, can I just ask if is it fair to suggest that this is also a cost benefit analysis?
Yeah.
That there are certain benefits that we would get with CMAR, but they come with a cost. Do we need those benefits? So to me, it's not just about money, it's about being practical about what we need for the specific project and therefore what we should pay for it.
Exactly.
Can I make a comment? Because we're, depending on your level of experience with these things, it definitely shapes your view of the cost benefit analysis, Pat. That's an excellent way to say it. I too have experience with a CMAR school project, and in my prior job, I wasn't there during this phase of it, but I was there. I became town manager about halfway through, and as town manager, I had to sign all of the change orders, all the contract documents, all that stuff. And so I was involved in virtually every discussion about project performance, change orders, everything else. And that project was complex. They were basically building a new school adjacent to the old school. They were going to continue to have students in and out of it. And so there was a lot going on at the site. And, the construction site and the active high school were, basically commingled. And I will tell you that while the project did finish on time and somewhat under budget, the end of the project, the closeout, it was under budget because we didn't use some of those pockets of money that were set aside. We did hit unforeseen site, demolition circumstances. And then we also gave up a bunch of scope to be able to finish under budget. And we were also, as a building committee, trying to decide, are we going to go to court with our designer or are we going to go to court with the GC? CMAR did virtually nothing to change that trajectory. And so this idea that, and let me say this, the other part, and so I guess the thing I really am getting to, the point I'm taking by the roundabout way to getting to is, it's not one way is right and one way is wrong. Okay, two things can be true at the same time sometimes. Like CMAR worked really well for high school. I wasn't here for that, but I believe what the public commenter said, that it really worked well for the high school. I take their word for it. It sounds like it did. I also know from asking some questions that the high school was a complicated project. My view of it is two or three things. One is, what is right for this project? My first blush at this has been, I don't really have a horse in the race of which method of construction we choose. I really just want our consultants to agree on it and agree for really thoughtful reasons that are specific to this project. And as we've heard now a couple of times, they independently do agree. And then the other part of this is, we talked a lot about MSBA. Dawn circulated some information from the MSBA that's pretty recent. And looking at, there's a mixture of CMAR and DBBs. And in looking at the spreadsheets and the data, there wasn't a clear takeaway that one was clearly better than the other, from a threshold standpoint. I think it was just, each project decides what works for its circumstance. And I do trust our consultants. Their analysis lines up with my personal experience, but my personal experience isn't worth all that much. But I do think that we have really good information on which to make this decision. And so I would make a motion that we select design, bid, build as our method of construction.
So can I ask a question about those slides?
Can I ask, Charlie, did you make a motion?
I did.
Yeah. So Stephen just made a motion. Would anyone like to second it so we can have discussion?
I will.
Okay. So Heather seconded. All right. Let's open it for discussion. Charlie?
So I'm just going to ask the question I was going to ask a minute ago. If you look at the slides that you sent us, Dawn, and you sort them based on new projects versus add reno projects, and you sort them into DBB versus CMR, 8 out of 10 of projects over 90 million are all CMR. So if you look at the DBB side, and I'm just looking at the data that you sent us, the DBB side, they're all quite small. We have one for 104 and another one for 90. On the CMR side, again, this is new builds. You got 98 million, 140 million, 97.
You're talking construction costs. Our construction cost right now is estimated at 80.
That's okay.
I just want to be clear, construction versus total project. That's all.
Right. But we're close to probably to 90 right now, if we're going to add these other elements. So, I just cut it off at 90 and I said, well, you could cut it off at 80, you get the same result. But, 8 out of 10 of the projects above 90 are CMR. And the average value on the CMR projects is 55% higher initial construction cost. Initial construction value is 55% higher for CMR versus DBB. I'm just looking at the stuff you sent us and not arguing with it.
Don't forget de-escalation. That's all, Charlie. Don't forget to de-escalate the prior years. We're in 2021, so I just want, this is why data is so confusing, and sometimes you want to today's numbers versus 2016 construction numbers. Don't forget our whole comment about cost of escalation. So you have to de-escalate it in order to have apples to apples. But I'm
Well,
sorry.
sure, but I mean, you know, there's some on in both columns from all of those years. So I mean, we could get more explicit about it, but I think what it points to is the fact that these quote larger projects go CMR. And the point I was going to make was that if CMR is doing something, it's doing something for communities that have these larger projects. You know, it's used less. I'm sorry, DBB is used less for those large projects for sure. I mean, it's hard to argue with the data that large project business, you know, is going DBB based on those slides. So, you know, I guess, you know, getting back to the point about value, somehow these 8 projects, and this kind of goes to what Matt was saying, these 8 projects, these 8 out of 10, you know, they found value sufficient in you know, in their project to go with CMR. And again, it's the value add, it's the value that they're buying. Certainly risk mitigation is one of them, but we don't want to lose track of the fact that there is value that is being purchased there by these communities.
I think, Charlie, the way I looked at the data, okay, especially the Gantt chart that has the different projects going kind of on the same timeline as ours, it's not, the dollar value only tells one part of the story. And I think as Lorraine and Peter Martini have laid out, it really is a project specific decision. And my takeaway was there are different projects of different sizes, and there is a mixture of DBB and CMAR. If CMAR was inherently better, then they would all be CMAR, because there are very smart people in all those towns sitting on committees just like us, evaluating the same decisions. And if those smart people in those committees evaluated that in some cases CMAR works, in some cases DBB works, then there's no one is right and one is wrong. It is what is right for this project. And again, I think that the information that we've heard from our consultants, who really, I believe them, they don't really have a horse in the race of what method of construction we choose either. They want to choose the right one for this project. And I believe that the data and the information about our project and our site support the conclusion that DBB is right for this project.
Peter and Chris, you have your hands up.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is the environment for bidding may be very competitive when we go out. Will a CMAR have a benefit in that environment where they may have relationships with subcontractors and know that market very well? So that's one question. The other question is, would a CMAR have benefit in the bidding process, understanding that we come forward with a schematic design of X, but if we said we'd love to see if there was a way to bid out a bigger auditorium or a bigger gym, or if we're up against the budget, how do we cut it down? Would a CMAR be a benefit at that point? Those are my 2 questions.
Peter, I would say on the first question, and I will
Point of order, please. Hold on.
I apologize.
We're in the middle of a motion, and my understanding is, pardon me, please. We're in a motion now.
Yep.
For the board to deliberate on the motion. And if any of our board members have more questions, as Peter does, I would move that the motion be withdrawn. We finish our questions, and on the decision about CM at risk, we do so, and then we continue our deliberations. That's typically the way I think this would go in a meeting. Again, I appreciate Peter's questions, and I think they maybe need to be answered, but I think we need to follow a process so all of us during deliberations can comment on whether we support or oppose.
Okay. Peter, these were questions that you have based on discussion that is recent versus when we called for questions prior. Am I understanding that right? And you're looking for answers on them?
Well, I'm trying to make a decision on what way to vote, and that this is
Mhm.
a have and that's influencing that decision. So if we need to, I'll make a motion to withdraw the motion on the table, if I can do that.
I think the person who makes the motion has to do that.
Okay.
That would be me. And honestly, I don't mind doing that. But because I made a motion so we can move forward with the project. We've been discussing this. We've heard a lot of great information. I heard enough to make up my mind that I thought was objective, and I did listen to the public commenters, and I did look at the information we received, and I felt like I was ready to make a decision, and to get to a point where I decided to make a motion. If the rest of the committee feels like we're not there yet, then I would gladly withdraw my motion. I was just trying to get us to, so we could get into a discussion about the budget and just kind of move things forward.
Okay.
And then Heather would have to support as the seconder. Right. Heather would support the withdrawal of the motion.
I will support withdrawing with a comment that it is 9:30, and that's not to rush. This is an important discussion, but I just want to make sure there's a plan for how we get through. We have a couple of important votes.
We do.
So if you're supporting the withdrawal of the motion, let's withdraw the motion and then try to keep our questions very much to point into things that have not been discussed before. And so Peter, if you want to get that question answered, let's.
Yeah, so I will withdraw the motion with the comment, someone has to make a motion.
Yes.
Withdraw the motion?
Yeah, I withdraw the motion, but someone has to make a motion.
Yeah. Okay,
right.
Got it.
Okay, so the motion's been withdrawn. Heather supports the withdrawal. Peter, I think you were going to answer Peter Fischelis's questions, and then I would look to entertain a motion after that, unless there are follow-up questions.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead, Peter Martini.
Well, the second part of the question regarding schematic help, et cetera, I'll let SMMA answer that. On the subcontractor question, that's a very, very kind of key point here and a good question. The filed sub bidders on this project, which, like I mentioned before, masonry, waterproofing, roofing, painting, elevator, fire protection, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, et cetera. Those will be pre-qualified subcontractors, and in the case of either a DBB contractor or a CMAR, those will most likely be the same competitive, will be the same competitive subcontractors being bid by both. So on the filed sub trades, there really shouldn't be any difference in the contractors and who they are using. On the non-filed sub trades, which is demolition site, concrete, steel, drywall, millwork, and a couple others, whether you're a DBB or a CMAR or whether you do both, those contractors have their stable of subs. A lot of them, there's crossover. A lot of subs work for every single contractor on the list. Other general contractors keep their list very close to their vest, and they don't want to let anybody know their advantages with their particular subs. So there will be differences there, but it's just because contractors over the years have dealt with their own subcontractors, they've built relationships with them, and that's their guys. So it's really hard to see what the mix is going to be, whether you go DBB, CMAR, or you're debating one or the other.
And Peter Fischelis, would you mind repeating the second question? Because I didn't quite understand where you were going.
Yeah, my second question was simply that we come forward with a schematic design, we go out to bid, and we have options with a CMAR that are different than a DBB to say, listen, we want to increase the size of the auditorium or the gym if possible. Can you solicit bids to potentially do that? Or we're up against our budget. We need to cut the size of the auditorium. Is there any advantage to having a CMAR at working with you on that?
So what we would, at the end of schematic design, we still have an entire year of design ahead of us before we go to bid. So an auditorium, the size of an auditorium is not something we would ever do as an alternate. It's too complicated. It's too difficult to parse out. So that I think regardless of DBB or CMR, you're not going to have options on the size of an auditorium as you go to bid. It's just, the bid documents need to stand on their own, and you can't chop off a number of seats and then reconfigure that. So, I mean, there's a whole year of design that they can have input in, but they won't get bids on it until the bid documents are ready.
If there aren't any more questions, then I would entertain a motion on whether to go to CMAR or DBB. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I have a question that gets back to what Matt asked, and I think it is the critical one. And Lorraine also brought this up as well, that there are certain services and values that either we need or we don't need. And I don't think we have identified those in this discussion. I think we've said, well, gee, you know, DBB is fine for what we think this project is all about, but I don't think we've said that these are the services CMR can provide, and either we do or we don't want those. It's just an observation. For example, I think we talked a bit about the bids from subs, and subs holding some close to their chest and others not. I suppose is that a value that we have decided we don't need? You know, I think that there's 4 or 5 of these that we could go through. I hope we could go through them quickly and determine whether they are going to be important to us, whether we can give them up.
So if I may, I'll pick the one you just picked, which is the subs and the sub-bidding. So put aside the 50% of the scope are trade contractors. They're the same 17 trades, whether it's DBB or CMR. Their bid is their bid. They provide it to the CM, they provide it to the GC. That's the number you get. So that's 50% of the scope of the work. So let's put that aside, because you get what you get. And as we say to my kids, you don't get upset. That's it. The other 50%, whether it's millwork, what you get in the CM is they'll say, I'm going to send this out to Kristen Olson Millworking and Heather Bout, you know, drywall. And do you like those? Do you want to work with those? They send it out to bid to those. The numbers are still the numbers. And then if it's DBB and I say, well, I'm going to use Laurie Hunter Millwork because I've had great experience with her. You don't get to see that we're going to Laurie Hunter, and you don't necessarily get to see what price Laurie has. But does it matter? Is that important to you if the end result is that the bid came in on budget? So you get a say in whether or not you want them to send it out to the other 50%, but you don't get a say in what that number is that they give you. Their number is their bid at the end of the day. I mean, I have spent, I can't even tell you how many hours doing D-scope meetings at CMs. And I sit there and I'm arguing over what's in the contract and what's on the drawings with the other 50% and saying, no, you own that. It's the same argument I'll have with a GC, which is why I say that you need to understand the value. And do we need it? Do we need complicated site phasing documents? Do we need early packages to accommodate complicated site phasing and shifting and temporary parking and temporary roads? Do we need that? We do not. So that is a service we do not need and we do not need to pay for. Do we need a third estimate at this time when you have 2 professional estimates through Hill and SMMA? I would argue you do not. When we go CMR, typically the OPM's estimate falls off and you still end up with 2 estimates. So you have 2 now, you could have 2 in the future. So do you need to pay for 3? Do we have complicated phasing where we're going to be moving kids around the building and need to do temporary partitions and maintain egress paths, erect temporary egress stairs out of a building during a weekend or summer break or an April break where we're shifting phases? We do not. So that's not a value you're getting there. You won't get that value because it's not necessary. You know, on my CMR jobs, I will tell you, I can have 10 staff from the CM firm on site. 5 of them are typically rotating interns. We get them for 6 months, then they go on to another project as they're moving through the construction management business. We have to re-educate the next round of interns that come in, but we have to pay for those. Do they add value to the CM? Obviously to the CM. Do you see a difference in your project, what you get from those? I would argue we do not on Concord Middle School. So I'm trying to talk about the services you get and what you would pay for. You'll get your pre-construction services, where they'll do the estimating and then do constructability reviews. That is a service you will get. But if you don't have phasing and you don't have complicated site phasing and you don't have logistics to deal with, and we're not issuing early packages, what are you really getting that you're paying for?
Okay, so on the constructability, you bring that up. It's an interesting point. I think, you know, if you look at the building is not a simple, straightforward box. It's got a lot of angles. It's got a bridge. It's got, you know, it's got a cut in the instructional wing. It's got multi-level roofs. It's not, you know, what you would call a straightforward, simple design. It's elegant and it looks beautiful, and I like that, but it is complex. So the constructability value of a CM is something that we would want to basically say, well, gee, maybe we don't need that, and you know, we can get by without it. I think that's what constructability is to some extent.
So you can buy constructability as a service. So we use a firm called ReadyCheck for some of our really big projects, and our drawings go out and they do a third-party review. That's an independent service you can pay for through Hill, if that's something that you want. Our firm is ISO 9001 certified. We have an independent team who are not working on our project, take our project at milestones such as DD and 90% CDs. For 3 weeks, they do an independent review, constructability, MEP coordination review, and they come back internally with our team. We use a Bluebeam as our session to do that, mark it up, and our team pick up all those comments and make any corrections. So that is part of our quality system that we bring. And I will say, you know, we'll build a box for a manufacturing plant, but we don't build boxes for schools. So in essence, you know, our schools are unique. They are designed for the community in which they reside in and for the program in which they house. But it is somewhat basic construction at the end of the day. And, you know, with energy codes and sustainable codes and, you know, knowing we've designed net zero schools, we know the details. This is what we do schools, you know. So I think if the constructability review is really a service you want, then you can easily pay for that as an independent and still not get all this other value that you don't necessarily need.
So here's another quick one. Is the effect and contribution that a CM makes during design and construction documentation development during that next phase after schematic, the support provided in the estimation process of handshaking and coordination and involvement from people that have construction experience, basic construction, and you know, are basically in the field with the estimators to get the most accurate you know, estimation possible. That's another value. Maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah, so I'd be curious what Dawn, but we don't get a huge amount of design input, and you know, really the constructability is about materials and you know, phasing and sequencing. We don't get a huge amount of design input from our CMs. What I would say is that, you know, we are quite a big studio at SMMA, and we have projects that run in both, and we share a lot of knowledge internally. So if and when a CM brings an item to the table, that gets shared through all our projects. So as an example, I had a conversation about prefabrication for a project with a CM yesterday. They thought they had a new one out of the park. They came to us with prefabricated drywall soffits. It's something SMMA has been doing since 2013. So it was sort of we ended up having a laugh because they thought they were going to solve like a great problem for us, and it's something we know about because we've been sharing it internally as a team. So I would offer that, you know, while you might see Kristen and I and Phil and Matt, what you're getting is the K-12 studio experience and knowledge that we share across all our projects.
Yeah, and I think on the estimating input by the CM, it's a third set of eyes. You know, we could always, if we wanted to look at it down the road, have that third set of eyes do an estimate for us. We wouldn't necessarily recommend it now because we've got two very highly qualified estimating firms doing it, plus Hill, who's done it internally estimated on projects, plus SMMA. But that doesn't preclude us from possibly getting a third estimate on the project. And
so I got one last one that I'll throw out there. Go ahead.
Charlie, just a really specific, quick question.
This is the last one. We have a reasonably aggressive construction schedule. Given the fact that you would have a CM on board prior to construction for months, does that help with the construction timeline? And does that get us in the building faster?
so I would say that there's some very good value to a CM, and we keep using these terms, but on a phased occupied renovation, it's really critical to either have the OPM or a CM you're working with to really identify the phasing and the scheduling beforehand and make sure that goes into the bid. Does it save you time? I probably would say no, but it saves you some unknowns. On this particular project, we'll be putting together a schedule. We'll be putting together a construction schedule as part of our responsibilities in our contract. So there's not going to be any magic wand here to wave over a brand new building and how it gets built. It's going to take the time that it takes, and we're pretty confident that we've got that identified already, and then we'll continue to do it as the building gets designed.
Chris, do you have a question? Or are you going to make a motion?
Yeah, just to follow up to what Peter Martini had said earlier about a lot of the services and a lot of it that OPM and SMMA can do. Is it fair to say that what Lorraine and Peter are conveying is that they can assure the client that this project will be managed efficiently and brought to completion effectively as the functional equivalent of anything the CM's point? They're capable of doing everything. So we don't need the CM at risk. It's not adding value. Is that sort of a fair summary of what the community can take away from Peter and Lorraine's vast experience at this?
I would say yes.
Yes, I was asked to assure something, and then some of the words blinked out, so it makes me nervous. But I think I got it. And yes.
Thank you. Can we hear a motion at this point? Anybody want to make a motion?
Sure, if Stephen doesn't want to do it again, I will make the motion. I feel like we need to move along. So I will move that we adopt DBB as our construction delivery method.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Frank, you made a second? Frank Cannon?
I did.
Thanks, Frank. Any further discussion, Pat? I'm going to let you do it if you're called for it. My other board, I don't have a co-chair. I'm so appreciating Pat right now. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to comment quickly because I made the motion and to say that I really have taken into account all the comments we've gotten from outside sources and from everybody here really deeply. And like I said before, I have been leaning towards CM at risk for a couple of weeks because of all of them, but I feel like the information that we've gotten over the last week and today really convinces me, and because I trust our professionals, their opinion here and the answers and clarity in what they've said convinces me that we don't need to spend extra for CM at risk. So that's why I'm making this motion and I will vote for it.
Thank you for that comment, Heather. Okay, anything else before I call for a roll call?
I'm just going to quickly say that I appreciate all the time that we've spent on this. As not a construction or architect professional, I feel very strongly that we have retained two really good paid consultants for this project, and that I am persuaded to follow the advice of our paid consultants, which is why I will vote in favor of DBB.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So I'm going to call
Just-
for, oh, sorry. Yes, Chris, was that you?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Oh,
Just,
I'm sorry.
No, just part of discussion, I mean, because the vote will reflect my decision anyway. But quite frankly, I'm not persuaded. I do appreciate Lorraine's expertise, and it is credible in many respects, and Peter's follow-up. But I am more persuaded that the complexity of this project and the unforeseen circumstances we may encounter with respect to demolition and so forth, and some of the other things going on, that this project lends itself better for construction manager risk, and the additional costs up front will probably yield savings, based on the amount of information we have today. So that's just a preview of, as they say, of coming attractions and what my vote will be. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm just gonna comment too, because I want to be clear. I'm not convinced either. I think this is the biggest project that, one of the biggest projects that Concord will do. I think having the insurance, to me, of extra expertise is warranted. I understand we have great expertise on the board, but I just think that there's benefits to having these to a CMAR that will help the project. So I'm not going to support it.
Okay, so let's.
Can I also make my comment, my advanced comment? I feel in a similar way to some of the previous commenters. I would like to see a top quality CM on our side of the table as soon as possible. We don't have construction management experience on the committee today. I think we need it badly. I think CM at risk would provide that. I think we need that as soon as possible after we start design. And I too think there are risks here. And when I hear comments from very, very senior people in town who have held elective office and have been involved in this business, who say this is in the interest of the town to do CM at risk and DBB is not. I hear the articulated comments about that. I also am not convinced that DBB is the way to go. I would like to have that extra assurance, and I would like to have those services. So that's kind of my take.
Matt?
I just wanted to say that I feel uncomfortable as well with the DBB approach, especially just given that while we do have great professionals at the table, they really reflect just one side of the aisle, if you will, and it's particularly evident just with our architect leading the discussion today, about this choice of project build approach. So I just feel like we need professional construction expertise at the table, that is engaged in our project. I'm just very concerned with the scope of this project. That yes, while we do have, I think, folks that are very experienced, that they also kind of have one perspective, and that we don't really yet have that full balance of perspectives here.
Yes, Court.
Yeah, I believe people know my opinion. I've tried to listen with an open mind on this. I believe I have. I believe it is there's a lot of nuances to this, and unknowns as to what we would be purchasing or foregoing around value if we went CMR or DBB. As a matter of cost savings, I will note that we're already at 100 million plus. So whether we go to 108 or something else, we're still going to have an impact on citizens that's not small. It's going to be very real. So we're already at the major investment side of things for this town. And we've all said that, we all believe it. So given that, I have to come down on the side of quality. If we're going to go this big, let's do it well. And if we can have more quality assurance. I think it's worth something to this town. And as a school committee member, I believe I represent the great majority of the committee when I say if the CMR can bring more risk mitigation to us and logistical ease for the town and its employees, it could be value that we learn to appreciate over time. Thank you.
Anyone else want to say anything? If not, I'm going to. I've tried to stay mostly quiet for this discussion. I seriously don't have, in my experience, I've done both. I have experience with both. I have good experiences with both. I have bad experiences with both. There's no right answer. This construction projects are complex. There will be issues. I'm telling you right now, construction is never easy. Given the parameters of this particular project, with my experience and based on our professionals in the room, I think design bid build is probably the right direction to go. And that's just based on this particular project's, parameters and scope and scale. So for what it's worth, I literally have, in my mind, construction is construction in a way that it's complicated. It's never easy. There are hurdles that you have to overcome. And that's part of being a professional, is helping your client through those hurdles. And I trust that our professionals will be with us along the way and be partners in this. So for whatever it's worth, that's my 2 cents. So anyone else before I call for a vote?
I'll just follow up on that, Don, if I may. I think I'll say I'm struggling right now. I respect the recommendation from our professionals, and I want to go along with that and support that. I think part of the, and I don't want to speak for the others who have voiced their concerns, but I'll say, at least from my perspective, part of that response is because it feels like, to me, the presentation has been biased towards design bid build, and I feel like there is there was a decision early to go in that direction, and a lot of the presentation has been to support that kind of pre-made decision. And so I guess I think that's where at least I'm struggling, is that I think it could have been a more balanced representation of the issues. So I'll leave it at that.
So
Don, if I could just say something. Matt, I understand, and I've been torn about this decision as well. If our professionals started out with DBB, I trust that it was for a reason, that it was based on the what this particular project would be. And I would expect our professionals to come to us, not to give us the decision, the figuring out what's right for this project. I'm not the person to make that decision. I don't think you are. I don't think most of us are. They came with what may feel like bias to some, but to me it was a recommendation based on the facts of our project. And I frankly trust that. This is largely a question of trust, and it's also a question of fear of risk. So certainly, if we vote as a committee to go with CMR, then we're taking a very conservative and more expensive approach to the project. That's fine. That could be the decision of the committee. But I really don't want it, I can't let it just pass that this was a biased discussion. Our professionals came to us with an opinion based on our project, this project in 2021. Which is why I'm still.
Yeah.
No, and I appreciate that, Pat, I guess I'll make I think there's a distinction between recommendation, which I absolutely agree with, that we need our design professionals to provide that, and the way in which some of the information was presented. I think that's where I guess I'm keying in on my comment about bias and how not reflecting the value that the alternative CM at risk option does provide, because clearly it does in terms of other projects pursuing it. So
it's not black or white. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if I could, sorry, Chris. I guess I wasn't going to comment because I'd already spoken about this, but I agree with Pat. I think using the word bias, it may that may be just, for lack of a better term, but Hill and SMMA, who have spent way more time than they allotted to help us with this project, by and large at their expense, have only one job, and that is to help Concord make plan for and design the best middle school we possibly can. That's all they do. Hill, as our OPM, makes sure that we are getting good advice from our architect, and SMMA makes sure that we are being listened to and that the design reflects that. And so they have done that consistently and have gone way above and beyond what would be normally expected or even reasonable to commit to this process into the town of Concord in a way that is really unlike any other level of commitment and faith and trust in us that I've seen. And I think it's too bad that we're choosing words that convey a lack of faith in them, even if that's not what is intended. The last comment I'm going to make is if there's consensus that it's worth a premium to have CMAR, okay, and there is consensus that based on the information we have, it does have a higher upfront cost, but we're getting services that are valuable to us. I'm going to go back to, again, because it's not really a thing that I think is right or wrong. It's what's right for this. Where does the budget fall in this decision? Because I started off by saying we should be talking about budget instead of spaces. If we're saying that we want to go CMAR, and if we do, that's fine. But if there's consensus that it's a higher upfront cost, are we adding that on to what we think we need to get the gymnasium and auditorium spaces that the community seems to want, or has expressed, not seems to want, but has expressed what they want? Or does that come at the expense of something within that? I threw the number 108 million out. As we make our decisions, for me anyway, I think that it's not black or white, as Pat just said, but if it's push comes to shove on the budget and something has to give, I think that what we get for CMAR isn't worth displacing additional gym space or auditorium space or ed plan space.
I'd just like to make an observation that it seems like the citizen members of the committee, are expressing concerns or opposition. And, I don't know how the vote may come down, but if it does come down in favor, but, the citizen members as a group seem to have had consensus against it, it just doesn't feel good as a decision, if it's driven that way. So I'm just a little worried, about it. Seems like we have a split right now, and that the split is also kind of very between, staff and chairs, or I don't know, but it just doesn't. It seems very much like a split.
Matt, let me just point out that I'm a citizen. And I care about taxes, and I care about the community. And I really care about kids in this project, but I'm coming at this as a citizen, not just as a chair.
Well,
you're just gonna have to trust me on that.
Let's also say that the citizen members, to my knowledge, at least some of them, have gone out and checked with their citizen colleagues who are in this business. It's not like we're sort of speaking for ourselves or based on our own specific experience, although that factors in. We have checked, or I have checked with people that have been involved in all these other projects, and people that are in the industry who live in Concord I haven't been asking these questions of, people that don't have that experience. I've been asking the question of people who do have it. And there is significant concern that DVB is the wrong thing to do. So I speak from the heart here, based on a lot of conversations I've had that have gone on for, in multiple times for an hour. And as a citizen, that's what I'm doing. I'm reflecting back, the results of the research I have done, with many other people. So, I'm not speaking lightly on this, and it is a difficult, very difficult decision. And I do think it is probably the most important decision that we will probably make.
Charlie, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Does that mean that my experience isn't as valued?
Your experience has value, yes, certainly.
I'm just gonna say this is really not about, I don't think we should be putting a value on individuals' experiences. We've been listening and collecting data and information, and the committee is charged with making a decision. I appreciate that we have the opportunity to share our opinions on this in this discussion part. But this is a time to share kind of how we feel about it. And I, again, caution against placing values on feelings. So Chris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just, I think to try to summarize this is that we're all charged with evaluating the evidence in front of us and coming up with the best decision based on our understanding. I know that just sounds like pablum, but it isn't about feelings and it isn't about personal stuff. And I got to tell you, I respect every single point of view that's been offered here. We, again, to pick up on something the town manager said, we were very fortunate to have a consensus in support of this project to its main points, a brand new school that will function wonderfully for a lot of years. And we also have the benefit of a lot of very sharp people, and it's very healthy to have disagreement and debate about this. We've had it, and believe me, I've been so impressed because everybody who comes in here brings an awful lot of great horsepower and thought to the process, and have thought about this very, very carefully. So it's really, sometimes it gets said with all due respect, and you're really saying, I don't really respect it. But no, it's very genuine. I respect every one of these things. As Lorraine likes to remind us, she was not born yesterday, and neither was Peter Martini. So they bring a lot to the table. So I do respect it. But again, with all due respect, yours truly just happen to disagree with the best way of delivery method for this specific project. And that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, well, let's call the vote then. We have a motion on the table, just in case anyone's forgotten. There's been a lot of discussion to deliver the project via design bid build, and with a second. So Stephen Crane, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jared Stanton?
Yes.
Matt Johnson?
No.
Lori Hunter?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
John Harris?
Yes.
Russ Hughes?
Yes.
Kate Hanley?
Yes.
Peter Fishalis?
No.
Court Booth?
No.
Heather?
Yes.
Frank Cannon?
Yes.
Chris?
No.
Charlie?
No.
Matt Root?
No.
Pat Nelson?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Okay.
Do I have 11 yeses? Is my math right? And 6 noes?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you for checking my math. So with that, the motion passes to deliver the project design bid build. Okay, thank you for everyone sticking with us, by the way. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the other topic at hand, our scope and budget. Pat and I would entertain any motions anyone might have on that.
I will say this, if I may.
Please, Frank.
We have put out this questionnaire and we have all the results back from the town, and we have all the information the town has imported to us. Okay, now, I believe this is at the point of the ones that want it and the ones that don't. And if we're going to build a gym, they want the bigger gym, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that if we can afford it. If we're going to go and build the big auditorium, what are we doing about the 15%? Because we're going to go way over for parking. So, and it's going to be costly, but does the town really want this? If they do, then we shouldn't be building what we don't want, what they don't want. And we did this questionnaire, and you guys put in a lot of work to get the information. If we follow it and it goes over, then the town votes on it, and we go into town meeting and we lose, then we start over. So it's kind of a quandary. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Kristen, do you want to address the 15% in the parking? I don't know if that's, I feel like in all the discussion, maybe that needs some clarity.
Yeah, so I can report out on the information we've gathered so far, which is that the parking planned right now, the 134 spaces, reflects the zoning bylaws. And when we reviewed for any other zoning requirements that are behind an auditorium or something similar, it did not drive any adds. So any additions to the parking space count beyond that would be, something that we would decide here, not something that was driven by zoning. I will say that we did gather the information on what the existing sites have, and Sanborn has a auditorium for 350 seats and has the 70 spaces at Sanborn currently. So if you think about it, you would be if the committee were to decide, for example, status quo auditorium size, then you would have almost double as much parking as you do currently, at the site. So that's something else just to keep in mind. And then also these larger events that would happen during the evenings would presumably happen when the buses aren't needed. And so the bus spaces could double as additional parking. So those 18 bus spaces could be 2 spaces of parking per. So that's a little bit more fluff on the 134. So, and then I guess the last thing is, I think in all project types, you never design the parking for the maximum worst case situation. You design for the typical case and what is responsible. And so I think that putting, if the program were to have a 350 seat auditorium, I don't think that we would advise to have 200 spaces or something like that. That wouldn't be, that would definitely compromise the impervious space. That would compromise the fields program because it is a tight fit. But so those are just some of the facts out there. I don't know if Lori, you want to speak to how the schools manage parking for events as it currently, to kind of tie that off.
Yeah, and I might throw it to Justin too. We do back to school nights and things like that on, a couple of occasions a year, and it isn't perfect and it isn't without some issue, but it's manageable. I think the trade-offs feel a lot more significant to me than managing something we're pretty used to managing, because, you're going to give up fields and other things, and impervious surface is going to become a significant discussion at that point. So if Justin wants to add to that, but that's where I've been wrestling and where I landed.
Yeah, I have to just echo those same sentiments.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. And those who answered his questions. Anyone else have any questions, any motions?
Can I make a motion, Don?
Sure, Peter.
I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with recommending option D, keeping in mind $110 million budget figure. That is the upper end of the range based on escalations.
Okay, so your motion is to have a budget set at 110 and look to study the option D within that 110, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to paraphrase, I just want to understand. Okay. So we have a motion. Any seconds?
Second.
Frank Cannon seconds, okay. Discussion?
Could I get some clarification, Peter? Is this a budget in the form of a projection, or a budget in the form of a do not exceed? Because it can play out different ways depending on how we interpret it.
Yeah, I think it would be based on projection.
Okay. Thank you.
Point of clarification in terms of process. If I was thinking of a similar but slightly different motion, I think I know the answer to this question. We don't want another motion on the table until this one's debated and gone up or down, right?
That's typically, yes, how it works. So we can move, we can move this motion, look for a vote. If there's not support behind it, then a new motion can be made and we can discuss that. And
alternatively, Heather, could you introduce an amendment? Not suggesting you do so, but is that an option available to us?
Typically, yes. So if there was something that you wanted Peter to consider or amend in his motion, then in my experience and on other boards, that's certainly something that can be discussed.
Okay. But it needs a second to do that. So why don't I second Peter's motion?
It's been seconded. Frank seconded.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay,
so we're in
It's on the table.
discussion. Nope, that's fine.
Okay, sorry.
So Peter made the motion, Frank seconded,
Okay.
and we're in discussion. Yep. So it's appropriate if that's an avenue you want to go down.
Well, I want to let people discuss the motion before making an amendment to it, because that can be annoying, I know, if you don't get discussion. So I will let people discuss the motion first, and then I may make the amendment.
Well, I had to step away for a second. What was the motion? I'm sorry.
Stephen, Peter Fishalis made a motion to to move that the budget be set at 110 million and study the option D scenario where it's the double MIAA courts, and I don't have it in front of me. Is that the 550 auditorium combination? So the highest range of the combos we were looking at, the biggest gym and the larger the 550 auditorium. And you said that was a court asked the question if that was a not to exceed budget or a projected budget, and Peter answered projected. And Frank Cannon had, before court's question, he had seconded the motion. And then Heather was asking, is it appropriate to, not appropriate to put another motion out there, but to consider an amendment? And that's where we are, or amending the motion, but she hasn't made any suggestions if that's something she's interested in doing. She wanted to let the discussion play out. So that's where we are.
So why don't I do this too, so it doesn't seem like I'm being mysterious here. I'm not going to move to amend it at this point, but as part of discussion, let me just mention my thoughts on this. I agree with the concept of, I guess, establishing our budget with a higher top end. I would see it as more of a not to exceed. I would come back to the point that I think what Stephen brought us earlier about the expectations set at town meeting are really important. And given that the expectations were of a range up to, and we've heard 105 or today 108, even up to 108, I feel like that's very important. That's the expectation that was set. And I feel like within that range, we could conceivably accommodate what this community really wants and what we've heard so, like someone said, voluminously about. So I would support a move to increase a do not exceed to 108 or 110. My slight adjustment was that I would recommend a gym size of at least 10,000 feet and one of the two larger auditorium options. Most likely, I think 350 as a continuing where we are now because of parking requirements and all that. So my amendment, if I make it, or if it sounds like there's direction that way, would be to make the 110 a do not exceed and to focus more on combination A, or potentially, I'm not sure which B or C is, but I think it was B, the 10,000 square foot gym and the 550 auditorium even. But my focus is more on A because of parking constraints. So anyway, I've not made that motion to amend, but I wanted to.
Yeah. So to summarize, in concept, you agree with his motion, just the parameters of it are for you a little bit different in that you'd prefer not to exceed, so that it's clear to the community, we're not going to go over X amount, whatever that ends up, 110 or 108.
Right, and also that we're not aiming for 110. That if we go with option A, maybe it's only 105 or 106, so not that we're saying, okay, let's go to 110, but giving ourselves a maximum with buffer that hopefully it will be below that, but with the focus on option A.
Mm-hmm. And this is recognizing that the increase is due to a larger gym and auditorium, like take everything else out of that. We've already established none of that's changing, and then net zero's in, net zero ready is in it. Like that, those parameters are set. So yep. Okay.
It's only to increase gym and auditorium.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to have it clear to me and to others as we think about this motion.
Yep.
So any other discussion or thoughts?
So I guess I would say, for whatever it's worth, from I agree with Heather. I feel strongly that the budget was the committee can set a budget for what it feels is appropriate for the building it wants. As I mentioned at the outset, I do feel that it's 108 based on, what town meeting was told. And so I think for me, this is more of a principled vote. I think the last vote we just took for some was a principled vote as well. And so for me, this is kind of a principled vote. The difference between the 108 and the 110 on the median house is about $7, or it's about $15 a year. So it's not a significant financial impact on at least the median. But I just feel like town meeting was told this was going to be what we were going to try and live within, and I do believe that we can accomplish many goals within that original threshold. So I would be voting against 110.
If we vote on the budget now, are we going to continue our discussion of the auditorium size today? For example, are we going to continue our discussion on the additional square feet required, or are we simply voting on budget?
I mean, in some ways they're parallel in what we're hoping to accomplish, but I think by voting on a budget gives us a little bit of flexibility in being able to, push and pull, meaning like get the most out of what we're able to accomplish, hopefully below that budget, recognizing there's a strong community desire for a little bit more, both on the gym and auditorium. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that can be, like Peter's motion says that he'd like to see if we can accomplish combination D within the 110 budget. So for me, that is a clear motion that's what he wants studied. So.
He wants that studied.
Yeah, for 550 seats. Is that what you were asking as far as the size of the auditorium?
Well, I guess it seems to me that we're set. We are in a position to provide a signal as to what our intent is. I've been a advocate of a larger auditorium, ever since the design committee had that on the table. I was the one that recommended, moving to the 270 model. So, I'm not shy on adding things. However, I think we need to be careful in terms of creating expectations and creating a will of the committee around what it is we're trying to do here. And I think, quite frankly, if we're going to increase the budget, that we really need to be as conservative as possible in these ads, because we're up at a high number, and the feedback that came back on that survey really was not all that conclusive that, yeah, we want to spend more money because we want all this stuff. Yes, there was interest in adding space, and I think everybody on the committee is interested in doing that. But there was less conclusive evidence on the part of those who were, did not have kids in the schools, that they wanted to do that. In other words, they were very ambivalent. So 3/4 of the town, or 66% or so of the town, basically is saying, no, I'm not sure I want to do that. So I think we need to be careful, very careful, in terms of how we handle this, and that we take a conservative approach, because when it gets to town meeting, you want that number to be as small as possible, because I quite frankly don't think, going along with what Frank said, I don't think we're in a totally strong position as the dollars go above 100 million. So I'd like to see us talk about these two functions and get kind of right sized on what we're doing. I think we're doing a little bit more than we need to do on the gym. With the option 1 proposal, the 10,000 foot proposal, is a little bit more than what you really need to do. Auditorium at 350 seems right to me. That comports with the rest of the town schools. So that's more along the lines of what I think we need to sort out here.
To be clear, Charlie, is that scenario A, combo A? Is that
well, it is combo A revised. It's combo A.
Okay.
With a sharp,
with the pencil sharpening you asked about earlier.
I'm serious about that. Combo A with a sharp pencil on the gym.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Going with 42 by 74 cross courts, and I have detail on this.
Mm-hmm.
But it basically gives us I think a better position with the town to pass this thing at town meeting, and while at the same time meeting the needs of the community. I don't think we need to do everything, and I think we need to be very careful about how we extend this space proposal as we supposedly get more money by increasing the budget. It doesn't come for free. It comes with a political cost, with people who are going to vote for this.
I know there are comments, but can I just respond quickly to something Charlie said, just because it's direct?
Sure.
One is just, I know you're talking about the gym size there, Charlie, and 10,000 square feet being maybe more than necessary. And you've referenced middle school gym sizes. I just want to point out that number from CCYB was based on needs that are not just middle school basketball. So I think that's part of why it's bigger. And personally, I feel confident in the information that they've given us in terms of 10,000 square feet being needed to run the 2 simultaneous practices. But I just wanted to point out, it's not based on just middle school numbers. So maybe if you look up middle school basketball, those are the dimensions, but that's not the only thing we're talking about here. And then I also wanted to just point out, in terms of that what you say about the, if we go too high, this could fail at town meeting. I just want to point out the flip side, which is we have had things at town meeting that failed because they didn't go far enough. And I think the last thing we want are all of the people who want this to be more coming out at town meeting and failing the project because we didn't do enough. So that's not to say that will happen, but there's that risk on both sides.
Okay, I accept that. I believe there's a balance. And I think that getting back to Dawn's question, am I interested in option A? Yes, I am. And I'm interested in doing whatever we can to scrutinize option A and make sure it's as conservative as we can get it, while at the same time meeting the needs of the community. That's my take, and it means that we may have to sharpen the pencil down the road, and that means that that may happen during schematic, and that's fine. But I just think you got to be very vigilant here with this space question.
May I say?
Thank you, Charlie. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Thank you, Charlie. And for what it's worth, I agree 100% with you. And I feel like that's a good, for me, and, I'm playing my cards a little bit, but I feel like that's a nice compromise of, listening to community, being cognizant of financial impact, and also providing the best school for the community, which is ultimately what we're here to do. So Frank, was this relevant to what Charlie said? Because I know Kate had her hand up, and there's some others as well, Chris and Peter.
I'll go last.
Okay, but do you know how to put your virtual hand up or no? I can remember to come back to you if you don't. So, okay, bear with us for a second, Frank. Thank you. Kate, I saw your hand first. Thank you for being patient.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to say, I think, my concern with option D is the impervious surface. And I know we've talked about this, but I just wanted to voice that concern. I think, the low end is just below that 15%. The high end is above it. And I'm wary of, a lot of community feedback that we will get if we start to really increase that impervious surface. And I think also concerned about the logistics of just if we did need a variance, what that would entail and add on to the process. And I don't want to put our designers in a tight spot of trying to design to that 15% and have to, it's a tight site like has been mentioned. So that's really my top concern with option D.
Great points, Kate. Thank you for sharing. Excellent. Let's go to Chris, then we'll do Peter, and then we'll do Frank.
Yeah, Kate covered half of my comments, and thank you, Kate. The other part is with up to 550 on the auditorium, picking up on Lorraine and Kristen have pointed out, changes to the auditorium are much more challenging than changes to the gym during schematic design. And I suspect part of that is coming up with a size that works for middle school students, and picking up on something Charlie mentioned a while back when we went to 270 seat gym, auditorium rather, is making it acoustically appropriate. And so I still have questions of, if we are at the 550 range of seating, can this be designed within our budget that is acoustically appropriate for kids? So quite frankly, I'd love to see a performance space where kids can perform and not have to be mic'd. The acoustics are good enough that they can learn how to project and use their voices comfortably and safely. So they're well trained and not relying on a mic. And I know the experts can tell us 270 is one set of factors and 550 is something else. And what is that going to look like? And maybe the simple answer is, yeah, you can design acoustically appropriate at 550 seats, and we can consider that. But that I think more clarity on that, and then following up on Kate's point, is when you push that up and you add something I hadn't appreciated, the potential for more parking demands, that changes your site coverage. So we got a few variables there we want to work out, so we don't exceed the 15% cap, and if we could possibly avoid that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris. I will keep it to, because of time, I can tell you that I'm positive our designers have acoustical engineers that they can make any size auditorium appropriate for both the students and larger performances, depending on the seats. So I think if I could get a head nod from them, that's probably what they would say. Just knowing what I know, and everyone's got acoustical engineers, and we work closely with them on all performance spaces. So that'll become important as that space gets designed. All right, Peter Fishalis.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I would amend my motion to change it to not to exceed 110. And I would also add not to exceed the 15% impervious surface restriction.
Okay, so we have an amended motion. Frank, you seconded the first motion. Is this something you're interested in seconding, or is anyone else?
Sure, why not?
Willing to? Okay, Frank.
Why,
Okay.
I was saying what I was going to say.
I was gonna say, you can have the floor for your comment. So if you're, okay, so you're officially seconding, do I understand that right? The amended, not to exceed 110 and to not exceed the 15% impervious
Well,
restriction.
do we want to use, I guess what my question was, do you want to use 110 or would it look better going before town meeting to use 1.8?
I'm happy to have you guys discuss that.
Stephen, is your feeling that 108 would be principled, a better ask?
I guess, Peter, I appreciate the question, and it just, and I know we have been saying 80 to 100 in a lot of communications, and I think that was because we were in feasibility and we were trying to kind of generally state a target at a very high level of design. And again, I have to go back and watch what was said, because that 80 to 100 wasn't really said during the debate on Article 14, and I wanted to be precise in terms of what was voted on, because that's, like I said, to me, and for what I do, that really matters. And I guess because there was, and working with those numbers and working with Jared, 108 was the number that, based on that formula, as a cap, as an NTE amount, it just, I get rounding, like in projects, sometimes it does make sense to round up or round down depending on the situation. I just feel for where we are, and because of the information I've seen from Hill and SMMA on the options I think can be achieved within that number, I just felt strongly that that's really it's truth in advertising, I guess. And that's why I feel that way. So I don't, but
then I will amend the motion to make it 108.
Okay,
so amend your amendment or amend your second, or where are we? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess the question is, do you still want to second that, Frank? He amended to not to exceed 108.
Yeah.
Was the original motion seconded?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you could withdraw and remake it. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It doesn't.
All right, so why don't we make it clean? I'll withdraw it.
Okay.
Put a new motion on the table that says we proceed with having SMMA designed to option D, not to exceed the 15% impervious surface and not to exceed 108 million.
Can I just ask, okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Frank. For discussion, I think the designers have been clear that that option puts us over the 15%. Just the footprint of the building, and I'm not even talking increased parking. That was my understanding coming out of the presentation that was done. Yes, Court.
This may be silly, but I want to parse words here for just a bit, Peter. Designing to option D would be different than designing toward option D. Designing to option D sounds like you have to produce it. And instead of
we'll change that to
instead of being an aspirational
sure.
objective. makes me a little more comfortable. Thank you.
Yep, I'm fine with that change.
Yeah, Peter, the intent is, I don't mean to put words, I'm asking the question, but is the intent to get the most we can get for gym and auditorium space within that number?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a simple financial question? What is the difference in cost between, or incremental difference from going from the gym in option 1 versus the gym in option A versus the gym in option D? In other words, that the 1,000 square foot versus what I thought was the 13,000 square foot. What is the cost difference? I could do the math myself, but I don't have the chart in front of me. So I think it's multiple millions.
So ask your question one more time. I have the memo.
So
that
you've got a price for, oh, there we go. Okay. So you've got add one MIAA court is 6.2 million. Add a larger, okay, so it's the difference between 3.8 and 6.2 million. Let's call it 2.5 million if I'm doing that math correctly. Ballpark.
Yeah.
Okay. 2.5 million is 2.5% of 100 million, which is where we're at today. So 2.5 million to go from larger cross courts to having a second full basketball court. And there's no indication of outside funding and so forth and so on. I think it's the wrong message to be sending, that we're going to design towards something that, from a policy point of view, to me, just doesn't make sense. We don't have the pieces in place to support this second gym. The pieces are the rec department, funding for capital and so forth and so on. I think, again, I think we're adding significant risk here by even sending a message like that. You satisfy CCYB, my understanding, with the 10,000 square foot larger cross court scenario. Why isn't that the level that we want to get to? Why are we trying to squeeze another $2.5 million into the cost of this school by adding another court that we have no real fundamental rationale for, if you want to be conservative about it? So I don't know whether we're supposed to be giving our opinions now on this thing, but to give you a little sense of where I'm at on this, I'm not real positive about designing toward something that I don't want, that I don't think is appropriate.
Can I make an amendment at this point to Peter's motion?
Yes.
Okay, I would suggest that we amend the motion to read not to exceed 108 million, not to exceed the 15% impervious, and to direct our designers to consider additional space for the gym and the auditorium, so that we leave it open to see what we can get within that 108 million. That we've given them now a number. They can come back to us and say, this is what we think we can do, and we can improve that design.
But why is the 108 million all of a sudden manna from heaven to go to go as far as we can in adding space that we may not need?
Well, but what I'm saying, Charlie, is not to exceed 108, and we're using that 108 million because, one of the things people have talked about is that we want to get the will of the people in this. And the only place we get the will of the people in this town is at town meeting. And at town meeting, the will of the people was to go ahead and approve a feasibility study for something that could cost up to 108 million, based on the slides and what was discussed in 2019. So if we can put a cap at 108 million, that responds to the will of the people at town meeting. And we are saying what our goal is to try to accommodate greater space for the gym and the auditorium within the 15% impervious and the 108 million. We don't have to go all the way up to 108 million.
So Charlie, I think Pat's saying not necessarily focusing on the 13,000 square feet, just giving us ourselves a $108 million cap and then comparing the options again for what can fit into that. So not necessarily focusing on the two MIAA.
So we're not going to try to sort out the option A, B, C, D today. We're just going to say, well, let's do 108 and let's try to get as much in there as we can for the 108. See, I just think that's.
Or see, I don't think it's as much as we can. The way I understood Pat's was, let's see what fits into that 108 and then make that decision. Is that correct, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Charlie, you're right that there needs to be, perhaps some more discussion about what is the right size for the auditorium and for the gym. And we've gotten feedback from all kinds of sides. Maybe we need more discussion about that. I don't think we can decide that today. But I think what we can decide today is what's our cap? And a cap on the impervious and cap on the budget.
So those are the only two caps that we'd be proposing at this time. The only two directional statements that we'd make. That's good.
So I'll second, I don't think it's been seconded. I will second Pat's motion to amend the motion to be 108 cap and a 15% cap with further discussion of the gym and auditorium sizes that fit in within those parameters. As long as I'm correctly understanding your motion to amend, Pat.
Yeah.
Does it, as a parliamentary set of moves, what happens then to the prior motions? Is it easier to do what Peter did before if he's in accord and put one clean motion in front of the committee?
I mean, I think if the amendment passes court, then we would go then to the debate of the full motion, the original motion, which would then be in effect Pat's motion. And then we would vote basically on that again.
So we vote on the amendment and then vote on.
Yeah.
If that passes, that becomes the motion, then you vote on the motion.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Okay.
Chris,
just real quick, it might be helpful for clarity to restate the motion as amended in its entirety, including Court's comment about towards and so forth. So we are effectively understanding what we're voting on with respect to the amendment. That's all. Thanks.
Well, if we're being technical, I started my career in working on Capitol Hill. If the amendment would really be strike everything after the enacting clause and replace it with, and so Pat would restate her motion.
Fair point. Got it.
So my motion is that we amend the motion to not to exceed 108 million, not to exceed 15% impervious, and design toward option, whatever it was, option B. And I would amend that to just read as not to exceed 108 million and not to exceed the 15% impervious, and to further consider additions to the gym and the auditorium within that budget.
Thank you, Pat. Kristen, for clarity, would you throw that slide back up just so people can see what option B said on that? I have the PDF open, but I want to make sure everyone's seeing that so it's clear. I know it was mostly about the not to exceed numbers, Pat, but just for clarity. So when you said toward combination B, right?
I think it was combination D. What I've lost my train. Was the last motion by Peter included up combination D or combination B, whatever he included.
Okay, I think his was D.
He was saying D. Sorry.
D,
So
yeah.
So he was saying D, and I think one of the reasons why I would support your amendment, Pat, is because I think Kristen had said, based on what we already know today, option D would not be achievable with impervious, with a 15% cap and the budget. And so I think Peter's intent, which I still think your amendment captures, is do the best we can within the budget we have and the 15% cap. It just doesn't it doesn't pre-select an option to shoot for. It just says it leaves us some flexibility. And I think this committee is going to talk about what are those options and what is the sweet spot for those spaces at the subsequent meet once SD gets going.
Yep. So it sounds like a minimum of combo A. Combo D is a maximum, but that exceeds the 15%. So it's going to be somewhere in between is how I'm reading this. And our committee will study this first thing and moving into schematic design to, you know, find that sweet spot, if I'm understanding what everyone's saying.
Dawn,
All right, I'll assume I understood it correctly. Okay, thanks for putting that slide up. Would you stop sharing, Kristen, for the sake of any further discussion and voting? Anything else before we vote on the amendment? Yes, Court.
I may be overdoing it, but 108, let's declare what that means. That's construction plus markup. It has nothing to do with financing.
Total project cost is my
Total,
understanding.
thank you. Total project cost. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Okay,
Go on.
thank you for clarifying, because sometimes
Yeah.
that does get lost in translation. So
Thank you.
TPC, total project cost, which includes hard costs and soft costs. Yes.
Plus all escalation.
Yes. Great. Okay, anything else? Any further discussion? All right, I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment, which is a not to exceed 108 total project cost, not to exceed 15% impervious paving. That is the restriction in Concord, and a study which would include an increase in the gymnasium and auditorium within that budget, somewhere between the A and D scenario that our group will look at closely with Sims to maximize the amount of space and minimize the amount of financial impact within our budget. All right, great. Stephen Crane,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Matt Johnson,
No.
Lori,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Russ,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Peter Pachelis,
Yes.
Court,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, 16-1. The amendment passes. So now, I guess I've never had an amendment to a straight motion. Do I just, is there any further discussion? That becomes the motion now, is my understanding.
Right.
Yes. And at that point, do I call for further discussion on it?
I would call the question.
Needed? Okay, so we have a call to take a vote on, I don't need to repeat it. Stephen,
Yes.
Jared,
Yeah.
Matt Johnson,
Nope.
Lori,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Russ,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Court,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Frank,
Yep.
Chris,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Matt Root,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So the motion passes 16-1. Thank you. Oh my gosh, it's almost 11 o'clock. Thank you all. I think we needed to get to this point. I am so thankful for everyone's thoughts, debate, conversation, respect for each other, all of these things. We have such a great committee and members that are full of knowledge and information. So thank you for sticking with us. If there's any public out there still with us, thank you for participating and being part of the process and following along. I do think at this point, we will ask that our designers move into schematic design. That is ultimately what this is, it moves us toward. I think we were getting there. There's some logistics things as far as meeting minutes and whatnot at the next, I think the next meeting, if I'm understanding it, Kristen, is kind of a laying out of the SD process to get us to that milestone of, okay, then putting this forward to the town of Concord. So just a peek ahead, I think our meeting is 2 weeks from today. Is that the 29th? So
Yes.
we will look for that and for a plan to move us through schematic design at that point.
Okay.
All right. Anything else before, let me check. Any next steps? So that is the next steps. New business.
Just a clarification, Don, given that what we just passed left a little flexibility in what we're adding to gym and auditorium, I assume that'll come back as part of that next discussion and part of schematic design then?
Yes.
Yep. Kristen, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we're going to have to detail how we get to a decision because we still need more concrete guidance to actually perform schematic design.
So
Also,
that'll be one.
Not to talk about schools, but is there like a C- type of option or a B+ type of option in that it's a 400 square foot, auditorium, I mean, a 400 person auditorium and such?
I think we're going to work together as a design team to develop a recommendation on a way forward and what the options are in the plan, and then we'll get back to you on that.
Why can't
alert? Yeah.
So why can't the committee?
Sorry, Charlie, spoiler alert, Matt, it's likely to end up in between is what I'm taking away from today, is that there's kind of a minimum and a maximum that we're trying to find that sweet spot that is like, what'd you call it, a B-, C+?
The sweet spot between what and what?
Well, between the minimum of 350, I understood it as a minimum of 350, maximum of 550 on the auditorium, and then gymnasium would be a minimum of the 7642. I can never remember the dimensions of.
I wasn't sure we decided that. I wasn't sure we made a decision to do that.
I guess, Don, I view it as the sweet spot between 275 seats and 7,000 square foot gym, which is what came out of the design subcommittee. And with the far edge being option D, being somewhat the outer limit, somewhere in between there. But I think it's pretty clear from everything Kristen has said that, like I said, I think it'll come into focus pretty quickly.
I would just like to ask, I think we've got some nice concrete recommendations from CCYB, which is the community use of the gym. The auditorium has more of a community and an educational use. And I would like to ask Lori if maybe at the next meeting, she could sort of speak to what the optimal size of the auditorium beyond the 275 might be from the perspective of the educators.
Sure.
Is that a fair question?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I think we made huge steps forward on this project today, and I very much appreciate it. So I hope.
So now can I make the motion to adjourn?
Yes, thank you. Motion
Second.
and a second. Okay, Stephen Crane,
Great work today, everybody. Yes.
Jared. Is he still with us?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Jared. Matt Johnson,
Aye.
Lori,
Yes.
Justin.
Yes, I just want to add, I want to thank all the students for waiting outside until this meeting was over. I'll let them in school now.
Can you imagine? Thanks for a laugh, Justin. I think we all needed it after what, 3.5 hours. John.
Yes.
Russ.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Court.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Yes, thank you all.
Frank.
Thank you.
Chris.
Yes, thank you.
Charlie.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Pat Nelson.
Yes. Thank
And
you.
I'm a yes. Thank you guys so much. Whew. Have a great day, everyone.